welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Javier Perdomo. This channel is a place where I like to do theology videos, church history videos, and Reformation apologetics videos. With us today, we have quite a few different people. We have Adam Linder from his YouTube channel. I think, is it just called Adam Linder at this point?
Yeah, I changed it. It's just Adam Linder now.
Okay, great. We have Jared from Scholastic Lutherans, and we have Zach from the
The anticipation's killing me.
All right. Sorry. If there's ever any point where my guests speak and I pause there for a second, because my internet is freaking out a little bit. Hopefully we'll make it through, guys. I believe that we can, but I had to reset my router right before this. So
the Jesuits are fighting your router. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's all over. The Jesuits were sending their DDoS attacks to my router. So in any case, today we're going to be talking about this question: is Roman Catholicism growing in America? Average Lutheran says, is papism growing in America? Listen, guys, okay? The problem that we have is every time I put Roman Catholic in the title or Roman Catholicism in the title, it makes it such a mouthful and it makes it so long. And I'm almost left wondering if some of the people that need to see these videos most, like the people that have no idea who Lutherans and Anglicans or anybody else is, they're just going to be looking up, is Catholic this, is Catholic that, Catholicism. And so anyway, I go back and forth on should I name things Roman Catholic or just Catholic for the sake of the video titles. But in any case, today we're going to be discussing this question of, is Roman Catholicism taking over America? Because before we jump into my slides here and the stuff I have prepared for us, have you guys encountered this narrative? And if so, how often do you encounter, what sorts of people do you encounter it from?
I mean, I pretty much encounter it all the time on X. Like, it's just all over the place. Like, oh, yeah, recent famous person became Roman Catholic. GG's Protestant. And it's just like, goes on from there.
Yeah, I always see things myself like, all the smart Protestants are converting to Rome. It's Protestantism is effectively dead. That's what I hear.
Yeah. I mean, nothing distinct from those. It's also YouTube comment sections. Like people have a tendency to flock like you're a hive mind to the opposite team and just bomb their comment sections. So anytime you hear of a new argument or a reworked argument against, a Roman or Eastern position, you'll see all these people flooding into comment sections saying that who cares what the argument is, you're dying and Rome is winning, all this stuff. So just anywhere people congregate is where this rhetoric is happening.
Yeah. And why do you think, before we jump into covering some of this data and these sorts of things, why do you guys think we see these sorts of narratives online? Like, why are these pushed so often, do you guys think?
Confirmation bias is confirmation bias is such a big part of it. And I think too, like if you have more people behind you saying something and arguing for something, even without anything to back it up, just rhetoric makes something seem more true. So I think when someone enters into another tradition, say they become Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, whatever, and they add their voice to this sort of tidal wave, it adds an unwarranted credibility. So I think people force rhetoric and just this kind of triumphalism to paint a picture that maybe isn't reflective of reality. Whether it's cope, whether it's Stockholm syndrome, whatever it might be, it seems to be just the product of trying to bolster a newfound conviction.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'd like that we could mention that I think this will especially get relevant when we look at the data and why some people think the data is off is we also have the cognitive bias, I think, of being in particular situations and thinking that our situations map onto everywhere. So, for example, like I go to a church, I go to University Lutheran Chapel in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we're around a bunch of colleges. So we're around University of Minneapolis, right on campus, University of St. Thomas, University of Northwestern, Bethel University, Concordia St. Paul, which is a bunch of pre-seminarians in the LCMS. And if I were just to operate off of what I see at my church, I'd be like, oh my gosh, so many young people are becoming LCMS and showing up to church. Therefore, the entire LCMS is becoming really young. All the young people are converting. But that's not true. There are other parts of the country where tons of churches are closing because a lot of the members are just older. And unfortunately, they're being sainted. And so I think there are a lot of situations like that too, where some of the loudest voices of people that are most interested in this will congregate to certain areas. And then from there, they will take those experiences and think that maps everywhere in the world, or in the United States, at least.
I think that's a really good point. And it's kind of funny because even at my own church, and I kid you guys not. So one of these people actually, he didn't know that I went to that church, and we just ran into each other. He's this guy that is a former sort of like Calvary Chapel, and then has become Lutheran and had watched my content. He ran into me. Oh my gosh, like I think I've seen your stuff on YouTube, and we've become friends since, right? But he joined our church from looking at church history, from looking at all these theology debates. Recently, there's been another two, and we're talking about like young people. I mean, there were two seniors in high school that started reading church history and started looking at all these random theology debates online, had never heard of my channel, or I think either Scholastic Lutherans or anything like this. And they walked into my church and they're hoping to become members soon. And we had another guy just this past week that I just barely ran into. I haven't had the chance to really get to know him yet. But as I'm going on the way out, about to shake my pastor's hand, I see this younger guy also talking to the pastor, and he's telling him like, hey, I grew up Pentecostal, but I ran into Lutheranism online and this sort of thing, and I believe what you guys believe on the supper. What do I do now? Right? And so it's like, okay, well, if I'm thinking about my church, it's like, oh my gosh, all these young people that I keep running into are becoming Lutheran. But if I then sat here and extrapolated that to the rest of the nation and said, oh, America's becoming Lutheran before our very eyes, that would be a very silly thing for me to do, right? Just because I'm seeing some success or some traction in my church. Even if I was seeing more than that, even if I was seeing like hundreds of young men joining my church, that doesn't mean that every single other church in the country is seeing this, or even that a majority of them, or even that a plurality of them is seeing this. And that's something that a lot of people don't get.
Yeah, and I'm going to use this word very loosely so Adam doesn't shame me. But I do think it happens to be an online like psychosis phenomenon in general. Like not just like even in religious circles, but just in the general public itself. We, you know, to be just, I guess, 21st century about it, like not a whole lot of people touch grass. And so it's like anything that's not happening within my small, limited like hemisphere of life, and also whatever happens to be like in my online circle, well, that's reality. And everything else, like, oh, well, you know, like stuff going on just in other parts of the world. Well, that, I mean, that's just all fake news. But like, hey, look at my church, you know, we got young people. Look at, you know, look at what's going on over here. You know, this is all true and all real. And in my notes here, I literally use the political situation going on with like Charlie Kirk, where it's like you'll get people who say anything from Tyler Simpson to Israel to Frank Turk and the US government, or Charlie Kirk just actually didn't die and he was faking his death. But it's like, to a lot of people about this, it becomes this idea of, well, whoever is the most charismatic guy on YouTube who sounds like he's telling the most truth, well, that's the truth. And like, I don't have to look any further than that.
Or even worse than that, right? It might be like, I can't even tell which of these is right. And so whichever one most people on my timeline seem to be agreeing with, that one seems like it's getting some traction, right? And so that one's probably right.
Yeah, and to what we were saying before we started recording, we're just like, when you get into your online echo chamber and every other person is saying Rome is growing, Rome is growing, Rome is growing, it's like, well, I guess Rome is growing and everybody's becoming Roman Catholic. But it's like, in reality, I'm going to keep who I know who is the people growing the most secret for later. But it's just like, the reality is most if not all traditional Protestant, Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, like, we're not growing in this like take over the United States mentality that people are saying. In fact, it's another group that's growing the quickest. But what's happening online is just this, you know, illusion of a bigger growth. And the reality is, it's like, we don't touch grass enough to, you know, as you guys were saying, I'm from Minnesota too, by the way, Jared, but just like going out and looking to all these places and going, oh, actually, most of these churches aren't growing at all. In fact, they're shrinking and dying, and that's a problem. So what do we do about it there? So
the final thing I'll say on a similar point, I'll keep it actually outside of the online sphere, because there's so much we could talk about with algorithms and everything. Mm-hmm. But another is we have that bias of hearing the loudest voices, even in person or our clicks. So what I think of is, like at my church, there are people, and this is the case at every church, we can reasonably say this. There are people who show up every week, but don't like to church, but don't do anything else. They don't go to Bible studies. They don't go to events. They don't really talk to anybody. They leave immediately after. Those people are not at the front of your mind. And so, but then there's the other people that do everything. So I can think of some at my church off the top of my head where, all right, like if 4 people that were they show up every week, but only to church, if they were to leave my church, I wouldn't be thinking about them as much as, oh, a new couple came that shows up to everything. You know, I could think to myself, oh, our church is growing because these 2 people show up that are now in my clique that I'm really good friends with, and it expands my friend group. But then the people that sit like in the way back of the church who don't really sing much, who are just kind of there each time, they don't show up anymore. I'm probably not thinking of them. And I'm sure stuff like that is happening. Now, can we quantify it? Not immediately to ourselves so easily, but it's a real phenomenon.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to back up the stuff that we're saying here so that people, because I could see someone watching this video saying, oh, please, who's claiming that Catholicism is taking over America? Well, okay, there's this video that was posted literally a couple days ago where I'm getting the language is based off of the title from these 3 Roman Catholic apologists, influencers, whatever word you guys want to use, literally titled White Catholicism is Taking Over America. And they really do mean that. Like they straight up think like Protestantism is dying, that the church is growing at this unprecedented rate in America, especially, I think his name is Riker. He attributes a lot of it to like Mary and this sort of thing. And so here's an older tweet from him from earlier this year. He says, the Blessed Virgin Mary is converting America to Catholicism before our eyes, right? And again, 3,000 likes. He has a big account, definitely a much bigger channel than my own. Right. And so these are influencers and these are voices that are going out and saying this sort of thing. And he's not the only one. I mean, you have smaller accounts and smaller influencers that say the same thing from the Roman Catholic side. Here you have one who says, if you're still Protestant at this point, what are you doing? I feel like the only people still Protestant are people in family/church situations that make it impossible to convert to Catholicism. And then someone points out, time to get off Twitter and get out of your bubble. Many, many Catholics are leaving Rome and coming to saving faith in Jesus Christ through faithful gospel preaching Protestant churches. And he says Roman Catholicism saw conversions go up 50% or more across the United States this year. He says actually last year in 2024. And he says, ask any Protestant pastor and they will tell you that many are leaving to go to Roman Catholicism. So this is, again, one of these sort of like Twitter personalities and influencers they have on that side of things. One more from the sort of rad trad side. We see, again, the same sort of perspective. Protestantism's dead. The internet killed it. It's too easy to access the truth, right? And then he has, again, Protestantism's dead. Catholicism is inevitable, right? And you see this sort of like triumphalistic language all over the place with people on the internet. Now, what we're going to be covering here today will be a lot of the data that I mentioned over on my Substack articles on these very topics, on the question of are Protestants mass converting to Roman Catholicism, who is more devout, Roman Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, or rather Orthodox or Protestants. And so we're going to be covering some of that same data. And hopefully a little bit of new data that I've kind of added here, and I'm updating my own articles with, because the more data that comes out, the more and more the conclusions are just corroborated by all these different places. And so that's what we're going to be covering today. Now, the analogy that I open up with in my article that I give when it comes to why we see this triumphalism is this idea coming from the sports fan world. And anyone out there that actually has a favorite team, whether it's football or soccer or whatever it may be, knows that there's almost no currency as valuable as hype and triumphalism. And so it doesn't matter if your team is in a horrible place, if they've been in a horrible place for a really, really long time. If you have enough hype edits, rumors of potential key trades, fellow fans stirring up a frenzy of excitement for your team's next season, you can almost drown out the fact that your team hasn't made the playoffs in years. And this is especially the case if you're only tuning in periodically. If you catch your team winning a couple of games early on in the season, if you keep having your fellow fans of the team sending you these hype edits and so on and so forth, the more it seems like the hype is real. It's really coming true. The legendary comeback rumors are finally coming to fruition, until your team flounders and gets nowhere close to the playoffs yet again. But what happens the next year? Do people normally in the sports fan world learn from their mistakes and say, perhaps this was just empty hype. Perhaps we need a lot more that needs to be done besides just one key trade. Perhaps there are other... No. What happens? The hype train gets going immediately the next year. Immediately, right? And so this is just what happens all the time. And this is the same sort of thing that we see, unfortunately, in the apologetics world. Whether it's the Protestant umbrella or the ecclesialist umbrella, everyone has members that are guilty of this, okay? And so we see, your favorite podcasters, online influencers, and apologists pump out videos like nobody's business. They sell you this narrative that you hope is true. the other side can be easily destroyed with a single Google search and a 5-minute debunked video. Your apologists can't catch a single loss. They're debate-winning machines. Just debate our apologists. Debate our apologists. Millions are converting. Billions will be baptized. But for real this time. Surely it's going to pan out this time, right? Surely. And so this is the sort of attitude that we see over and over and over again. And I don't think I, nor anyone else on this panel, is a fan of this reality, right? Unfortunately, we see people from both sides doing this sort of thing, and it's not good. However, on the internet today, for some reason or other, it is mainly, at least from what I'm seeing on my timeline, it is mainly Roman Catholics and even Eastern Orthodox doing this. Now, for the Eastern Orthodox side, I think it's especially to be honest, especially delusional when the Eastern Orthodox are going on the internet and being like, everyone's becoming Orthodox. America will be Orthodox. Don't you know there's this one twice removed Eastern Orthodox founding father convert in the history of America. Trust me, this has been inevitable, right? You hear these sorts of things. And so, well, is this actually true? And we're going to look at some of the data here from Pew Research and a couple and some other places as well that Ryan Burge, this data analyst on X, has made available. Before we do, we have a $4.99 super chat here. Thank you so much, DoorDash Thomas. He says, hate watching your 30,000 denominations. Sheevan, Lagrange, Pranzelin, and Jernit Mogg, all your theologians, by the way. We'll find out. We'll find out if that's the case when I eventually at some point get down to reading more of them and interacting with you guys. I will say I do appreciate. I will say DoorDash Thomist, Kevin Fernandez, since 33, and I really appreciate that the newer wave of apologists do seem more interested in actually engaging. It seems at least in good faith with us, which I really do appreciate. So shout out to DoorDash Thomist for that. Obviously disagree with all his videos, and he's one of those that our side easily debunks. No, just joking. But that sort of thing really is toxic. So in any case, let's go ahead and look at some of this data. So before we look at some of the newest data, right? Because you have these guys saying like it's happening before our very eyes. The Virgin Mary herself is doing this, according to Cameron Reeker. Well, before we get there, let's look at some slightly dated data from 2010 to 2018. So this is the General Social Survey. Now you may be asking, what is the General Social Survey? It is a nationally representative survey of adults in the United States conducted since 1972. It collects data on contemporary American society in order to monitor and explain trends in opinions, attitudes, and behaviors. It has adapted questions from earlier surveys, thereby allowing researchers to conduct comparisons for up to 80 years. It contains a standard core of demographic, behavioral, and attitudinal questions, plus topics of special interest. And these cover things from civil liberties, crime and violence, intergroup tolerance, morality, and so on and so forth. They aim to make high-quality data easily accessible to scholars, students, policymakers, and others with minimal cost and weighting. They have carried out an extensive range of methodological research designed both to advance survey methods in general and to ensure that its data is of highest possible quality. In pursuit of this goal, more than 130 papers have been published in the General Social Survey Methodological Reports series. So again, this isn't just some random rinky-dink survey that we found that some random guy did. No, this is a long-established survey that's, again, been doing this for decades and decades and decades, for quite a long time. And so, well, let's see what they say about 2010 to 2018. This is a graph provided by Ryan Burge over on X, where he posted this. And so you will notice, according to this older data, that the portion of cradle Protestants that end up Roman Catholic is incredibly small, vanishingly so. Of those raised in Protestant households, only 3% of evangelical Protestants become Roman Catholic. Only 5% of mainline Protestants were becoming Roman Catholic, and only 2% of Black Protestants were becoming Roman Catholic. Meanwhile, 13% of cradle Catholics became Protestant. And that doesn't even constitute the totality of Roman Catholic losses. According to this same data, the Roman Catholic Church in America was losing approximately 1/3 of all of its cradle Catholics across the board around just a decade ago, right? And so this is the reality that we were working with from 2010 to 2018. Again, that does not seem like an overwhelming victory here for anybody in the Roman Catholic Church. Now, again, to be fair, right? And I want to be very clear about this, and we'll probably hit on this several times throughout this video. The point of this video is not to walk around and be like, we're so great, everyone's doing great. No, Lutheranism in America is not doing super hot right now. Okay, I don't think Anglicanism is either. Even just in general, Christianity in America for a while was seriously in decline. Things were not looking good. The decline has slowed down as of late, as we'll mention here in just a second. But again, we're not trying to do the triumphalism train in return. What we're simply saying is, when the other side's doing this triumphalist marching around on Twitter and so on and so forth, it's just not true. Or at least it wasn't true according to this data from 2010 to 2018. Now, before we go on to our newer sort of numbers, do you guys have anything you'd like to say? Any comments or anything you'd like to bring up right now?
I have a thought, yeah. Something important for us to mention is that we aren't, as you said, we're not doing this to be triumphalistic. Wagner quote tweeted the Scholastic Lutherans Twitter account today to say, the fact that you're going on this, I don't remember his exact words, but he basically said, why aren't you making videos about how the LCMS is winning instead of doing this? And it's like, well, I don't make that claim. Like, I'm not saying the LCMS is converting America, nor do I know anybody that makes that claim. So I'm not going to make a video saying that it is, because I don't believe it. Nor would I make a video refuting it, because I don't know anybody that claims this. But we're seeing triumphalists that are claiming this, and it's kind of like propaganda, if I'm going to be honest with you, the way that people are using it. And with that in mind, to be clear, whether Rome is losing members or whether Rome is gaining members really doesn't affect the way that we should be looking at things. In Scripture, there are times, especially, well, not just in the Old Testament, but a lot of the times in the Old Testament, the church is really, really small. Elijah at one point thought that he was the only Christian left, and there were 7,000 of them, it turns out. Jezebel's killing all these prophets. By the time of the crucifixion, I mean, who was really there? They all scatter, they run away, everybody's quiet. Like, God himself just dies in front of them. It looks like things are really bleak. And so I hope that our Roman Catholic friends watching this don't take this to mean, if Rome is growing, that means, or Rome isn't growing, therefore she's a false church. That's not the point of this. As I work as a data analyst for a living, this is just looking at things and saying this is the way it's going and trying to correct people on numbers. That's all it is.
That's exactly right. And I think it's very, very important that people get that, because when I posted my article and when I've been reposting it recently to try to combat some of these claims online, I always hear that those exact same sort of responses back. Oh yeah, because Protestants are doing super hot right now. How are Lutherans doing again? Huh? And I'm like, dude, and people say that, like, oh, this is just veiled triumphalism. I'm like, no, dude, it's not triumphalism to point out that your people are at best, and I'm sure we'll discuss this at the end, at best working with inaccurate data, working from a standpoint of a misinformed sort of extrapolation, like we talked about, of their current personal experience to national experience and so on and so forth, or at its absolute worst, and we can't read the hearts of anybody. I'm not claiming that any particular individual is doing this, but, or at the very worst, is just lying about this and hoping that this helps to, again, function as propaganda to help get things going toward the end result that they actually would hope would one day be the case. And in any case, we're just called to not bear false witness, right? And so we should do our best to try not to do that. And this is just an exercise in trying to combat misinformation, combat disinformation, and help all of us to hopefully bear true witness. So anything else, Adam or Zach, you want to add before we move on?
I think it's good to point out something that was in the chat that Jeff Robinson said, that it's kind of tricky when you even look at these conversion numbers in the abstract, because what we don't often see is the reason a conversion happens. And in a lot of these communions, especially communions like Rome and Eastern Orthodoxy, there is this pressure, sometimes excessive pressure, to marry into the church. That, well, if you're going to marry a Catholic spouse, an Eastern Orthodox spouse, whatever, there's this overwhelming pressure to convert. So a lot of nominal believers, atheists, will convert in a legal sense. They'll get baptized, confirmed, chrismated, whatever, and they'll convert into another tradition without actually having any real conviction for it outside of being joined to it through marriage or some family pressures. So even in the abstract, these numbers might even be inflated, so that the best picture might not even be as good as it possibly could be, because the people who are converting into these churches might not be doing so for the right reasons. It doesn't make a huge impact, but again, it's something we should be cognizant of when we are bragging about the success of our church, especially from the other side.
That's right. So, all right, moving on here then, but again, someone might be saying, aha, but that's 2010 to 2018. That's not the most recent, is it? And no, it isn't. Let's see what the most recent is. So we have this, before we go ahead and look at the data, It's worth mentioning that where it's not like it's just Protestants coming up with this. Here is a Roman Catholic magazine, Crisis Magazine, who put this out much, much earlier this year, saying Catholics are rapidly losing ground. A new survey shows that for every 100 new Catholics, more than 800 leave the church. And then actually the rest of the article is, as he points out here in the subtitle, as bad as that is, the news is actually much worse. And then he breaks that down much further in his own article. And it was actually reading that Roman Catholic article from a Roman Catholic source that got me to say, well, wait a second, let me look at this data and write my own Substack article, which is what this presentation is based on. So let's go ahead then. We're going to look at the Pew Research Center Religious Landscape Study from 2023 to 2024, some of the latest data that we have. And before we jump into that data, well, what is the Religious Landscape Study? The Religious Landscape Study is a survey that paints a religious portrait of the United States. With more than 36,000 respondents in 2023 to 2024, it is the largest single survey Pew Research Center conducts, allowing us to examine the religious identities, beliefs, and practices of U.S. adults. The study provides nationwide data as well as information on every state, the District of Columbia, and 34 large metro areas. It is the 2023 to 2024 data is the third in an ongoing series, and the survey was previously conducted in 2007 and 2014. Jared, since you work with data a lot, you maybe want to tell people a tiny bit about, because some people may look at this, and we were chatting about this before we turned the cameras on, which is a lot of people, because they don't know how to work with data, they don't know exactly how to understand this sort of thing. Some people, and I remember this when I first posted about this data, will look at that and say, 36,000 respondents in a country of millions? That's so little. But a lot of people do not understand how sample sizes work. And so maybe you want to chat about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I can talk about it a little bit. But so whenever you're working with data that has to do with the population of a country, I mean, fundamentally, you're not going to be able to get every single person to answer a survey. That's just like not really a thing. I mean, you have population censuses and so on. But when it comes to something like this, you have to use a representative sample. So with that in mind, I should say 36,000 is like a really good number. 36,000 people for a survey is really solid. When it comes to these kinds of surveys, if you're going to say, well, they're not surveying the entirety of the population, therefore we can't trust it, you effectively have to throw out all population, or not all population, but you have to throw out like almost every study that exists on a population. We don't really do this with much else, right? Like, a lot of the time we look at medical studies, are these with thousands, like 36,000 people over the course of something? Often not. No, these are not that many people. Certainly not 36,000. Yet we do abstract and push forward and say, yeah, this can apply much broader. So 36,000 is a really good number. That's not a good reason to dismiss this study. You would have to show conclusively that their sampling was not random, that there was some bias there. Whether it be, again, like they're sampling from a specific location or demographic that would answer in a certain way, or they ask specific leading questions that would push them to answer in a certain direction. But I don't see anything in here from the look of it that I've had that would indicate such is the case. So there are times when you're warranted to question statistics, but I don't see a case like that right now.
Yeah, that's right. And so just that everybody's aware, the Religious Landscape Study utilizes this word religious, or this term religious switching. And they utilize this instead of more familiar terms like conversion. And this is their rationale for it. So they say they do this because changes in religious identity occur in all directions, including from having a religion to having no religion. Also, these changes can take place without any formal ritual or declaration. They continue, a quote, "We measure religious switching with two survey questions. The first asks, what is your present religion, if any? The second asks, thinking about when you were a child, in what religion were you raised, if any? By comparing each respondent's answers to these questions, we can see whether they still have the same religion in which they were raised or whether they have switched. However, these questions may not capture all the switching that takes place. For instance, they would not reveal whether a person has switched multiple times, or whether a person left their childhood religion and later returned to it. Our analysis of religious switching focuses on the difference, if any, between a respondent's religious identity at the time of the survey and during childhood, not the steps that may have occurred in between." End quote. And so, again, just so that we know exactly what we're looking at when we look at this data, the sort of questions that they asked and how they are measuring this. So, with that in mind, well, what do we see? It turns out that Roman Catholics lose a much higher percentage of their people to religious switching than all Protestant traditions combined. I'm going to say that one more time. Roman Catholics lose a much higher percentage of their people to religious switching than the entire Protestant umbrella. And if there's anyone watching right now that's like, Javier, why are you doing a comparison between Rome and the Protestant umbrella? Don't we always want to do apple to apples comparisons? Yes, we definitely would prefer to do apples to apples comparisons. That being said, the reason I'm doing this is just because I'm responding in kind to all these people. Because when they say Protestantism, they're talking about the whole umbrella. This is their claim, right? Protestantism is dying, whereas Roman Catholicism is soaring. Everyone's flocking to Roman Catholicism. I'm just, for the sake of this video and the articles that I put together, I'm responding in kind to that exact claim that they're making, because it is just empirically false. And so what do we see? We see that while Protestants lose 180 people for every 100 that we gain, Roman Catholics lose 840 people for every 100 that they gain. Their own Pew Research people here say the ratio for Catholicism is incredibly lopsided, and they themselves point that out. But again, this includes all different sorts of religious switching. And so someone may ask, well, hey, maybe the numbers are bad in relation to the conversion from the faith altogether, but perhaps they're looking great when it comes to Protestant conversions in particular, right? Isn't that the claim that's being made? Well, Roman Catholic apologists and also just lay people on the internet, some of them anyway, would have you believe that Protestants specifically are jumping ship and swimming the Tiber to Rome en masse. This is simply not true. When you look at all Protestant traditions taken together, what percentage of all people surveyed who were raised in those traditions became Roman Catholic, you might ask? 2%. 2%. That means that for every 100 people raised Protestant, only 2 of them end up becoming Roman Catholic. And so, well, wait a second. Let's do an apples to apples comparison here. Well, what if we look to the more, the traditions that are, for example, represented on this very panel, like Lutheranism, Anglicanism, or even if we think about our Reformed friends? Let's just look at those, just the traditional, what we would actually consider like Protestant, not the way that the Pew Research survey uses the term, but the way that we would utilize it, these classical traditions. If we just narrow it to Lutheranism, Presbyterianism, and Anglicanism, the conversion rate to Roman Catholicism is 4%. That means that for every 100 Americans raised in these traditions, only 4 of them become Roman Catholic. And so, again, we're talking about like, this massive wave. I'm asking, where is it? Where is it? I want to know where it is because it's not showing up here. And so, okay, well, wait a second. Let's compare this, okay, to Roman Catholic conversions. Of those raised in Roman Catholic households, 14% are now Protestant. 14% are now Protestant. Okay? And so again, percentage-wise, there are 7 times more cradle Catholics who become Protestant than there are cradle Protestants who become Roman Catholic. And in fact, conversions to Protestantism account for 32% of all cradle Catholics' religious switches away from Rome. So out of all the people that leave Rome, 32% of them are leaving to become Protestant. And this is what we see. Or at the very least, they leave and maybe, because there could be other religious switches that are somewhere along the way, but they leave Rome and end up Protestant somewhere along the way, whether they do that directly or whether they do that with some intermediaries along the way. And so again, it's not just that, or I guess, okay, before I get to that, because someone may look at this and like we said earlier, they may try to denigrate Pew Research Center. This is what you see online, right? People are like, Pew is biased. They're a bunch of libs. And there's just a bunch of cope, frankly, that we see in response to this. Well, is it just Pew reporting this? And is everyone else reporting all of this beautiful data that supports this Roman Catholic triumphalist narrative online? No. So here we are back to the General Social Survey, this time newer data from that survey from 2022 to 2024. As Ryan Burge points out, according to the latest General Social Survey data, just 3% of people raised Protestant end up as Catholics, while 12% of people raised Catholic end up Protestant. And among people, by the way, as he points out, among people raised non-religious, notice this, while only 2% of them become Roman Catholic, 22% of them become Protestant. And so it's not just that when it comes to the percentages, are far outranking Rome in terms of like which way the converts are flowing, But even when it comes to, frankly, a much more important demographic here, and that's people that are raised without knowing Christ at all, people that are raised non-religious, they're not flocking to Rome either. Definitely not compared to those that are ending up Protestant. And so this is the sort of reality that we see here. As far as the data is concerned, the current Roman Catholic triumphalist narrative is, and I want to be very clear here, verifiably false. It is false. Okay? It doesn't matter how much people may shout it from the rooftops. It is false. At the very least, according to all of this data that we have, decade-old data, up to literally last year, up to like right now. And so again, people are saying, oh, but what if the data hasn't caught up? It's just right now, the wave is coming. Right now, the wave is coming. Yeah, but the wave's always coming, isn't it? And when the wave's not here, the excuse is that the wave is simply still coming. And this is what we hear over and over again.
As if you look at like the previous slide there with that other Pew research, if you look at especially from the religious unaffiliated to the now identified as Protestant, you see 17% there, while you see the Roman Catholic side as well only getting 3% as well. So it's not just one research study saying 22 and I forget the other number. It's both of these are showing. I'm going to use very quotations as it's low statistics, but it's like bigger numbers getting pulled towards Protestant groups as well. I just want to point that out.
So it's just again something to consider here. And so again, why do we see people then? And maybe we can chat about this before I go on to the next slide. Or actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and cover this right now as well. The main cope that you guys will hear at home. Perhaps there are people right now after this video. I guess people, well, not right now as I'm speaking, but right now for the viewer watching this video after we're done with the live stream and we posted it, who are already typing in the comments, aha, so maybe our narrative was wrong, but that's just because we're bleeding all of the people that don't care about our theology, that don't care about our moral practice, that don't care about these things. And we're being left with a super devout core that Protestants can't even dream of having. Because, by the way, this is the exact cope that we see, not just from the Roman Catholics, also from the Eastern Orthodox. I mean, we see stuff like this, right? Orthodoxy is the only standing bulwark against the liberal West. We see things from Rome here as well. Those who leave Catholicism do so not because they found truth elsewhere, but because they found it too difficult. The Catholic Church demands obedience to Christ's full teaching, while Protestantism offers a custom-made faith where doubts, sins, and heresies are tolerated. But Christ never promised an easy road. He promised a narrow path. Trading the church he founded for a faith of personal convenience is not seeking truth. It's fleeing from it. We see this other tweet here with almost 5,000 likes, 172,000 views. The Catholic Church is among the only Christian churches left without a single ordained female, which is dwindling by the day. It's also the only church which takes the sins of divorce and contraception seriously. All others have compromised and fallen away there. So the narrative that we see, that's always this backup narrative. So sometimes you'll see this in your social media feed, but oftentimes you see this as a backup narrative. When people start out with, haha, we have this mass wave of converts, and you go, no, you don't. Here's all the data. Instead of acknowledging, oh man, my worldview is actually completely wrong on this issue. I'm sorry. Let me go back and think about it again. No, the immediate counter is, aha, but that's actually a good thing, because what's actually happening here is we're getting more and more devout. We're the sole standing bulwark against modernity and these sorts of talking points that you hear. And so again, in my opinion, I especially this backup talking point, I think is used for a couple of things. So one, I think it's used as a form of social pressure to either one, guilt Protestants into converting to Rome or the East. Oh, after all, we're the sole bulwark. Or two, to hand wave away conversions from Rome and the East by minimizing those who do so as people who took the easy way out. But then let's go ahead and ask while we're here, let's ask, is this backup narrative true? Are they just way more devout than Protestants could ever dream of being? Because after all of the non-devout people are leaving, so all the really devout ones are staying, and they're going to have this super elite group of Roman Catholics left behind. Well, is this true? Let's compare some data. Also from Pew Research Center, let's compare on basic sort of signifiers of just basic piety, guys. Basic things like, do you attend church? Do you pray? Do you read the Bible? There's not going to be some super secret devotion to Mary where your spiritual life is doing great, even though you never read the Bible, never pray, and never go to church, even from a Roman Catholic standard. That's just not happening, right? And so let's look at some of these basic things. Religious service attendance among Roman Catholics. Okay, well, what do we see here? 32% of Roman Catholics say that they seldom or never attend religious services. You see the same thing for the Orthodox. Now, to be clear, while we're not focusing a ton of Orthodoxy right now, I have them on the slide, so you guys will see that as well. To be clear, here the Pew Research study here is looking at Orthodoxy as a combined unit. So they're lumping in Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox. Keep that in mind. That's why it says Orthodox. So just, keep that in mind as when you read this data, because we want to make sure that we're all being accurate and fair here. So let's ask ourselves, well, wait a second. So 32% of Roman Catholics say they seldom, never attend religious services. Well, perhaps the other almost 70% attend church regularly, right? Well, no. As you guys can see here on the slide, only 29% of Roman Catholics attend religious services at least once a week. And so we may be asking, well, how does that compare with evangelical Protestantism? And again, notice here, we're talking about evangelical Protestantism because they when it comes to this part of the study for these questions, they actually break it up a little bit. So evangelical Protestants would be those here. I think I have the definition here somewhere. If I don't have it handy, just feel free, guys, to go and look up their exact definition of evangelical Protestant. But it's essentially just, it's not like the mainline Protestants, right? Which again, we may be asking here, oh, well, how is that fair? Well, I mean, the LCMS is not in communion with the ELCA, right? And so on and so forth for things like the PCA, and we can go on from there. So a lot of these mainlines are not in communion with the evangelical Protestants. And so I think it's fair to actually look at the evangelical Protestants as a unit here. And so, all right, well, let's compare this to the evangelical Protestants when it comes to church attendance. 50% of evangelical Protestants attend church at least once a week. 50%, so at least half of them. And again, I wish the number was much higher. I wish the number was, 100% or 90 something percent. That would be awesome, right? But let's compare that to what we saw before. That's 32% of Roman Catholics who seldom or never attend church, and only 29%. That's almost a quarter of them. Only a tiny bit over a quarter who attend church weekly. Evangelical Protestant, that's 50%. And it's only 23%, less than a quarter, who attend church seldom or never. All right. So now let's go on from there. Let's look at the next thing. Let's look at scripture reading. What's the frequency of reading scripture among Roman Catholics? About 67% of Roman Catholics say that they seldom or never read their Bibles. That's over half. Seldom or never read their Bibles. That means that for every 1,000 Roman Catholics in America, 670 of them seldom or never read their Bibles. Likewise, if we look at the Orthodox side, this means that for every 1,000 Orthodox in America, 590 of them seldom or never read their Bibles. In fact, only 14% of Roman Catholics and 15% of Orthodox read their Bible at least once a week. Let's compare that with evangelical Protestants. Look at that. 51% of evangelical Protestants read their Bible at least once a week. That means that percentage-wise, there are over 3 times more evangelical Protestants who regularly read their Bible than Roman Catholics and Orthodox who do so, again, percentage-wise. And so that's what we see on scripture reading. That's what we saw then earlier on church attendance. Now let's look at prayer. And by the way, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm going to be totally honest here. I was shocked by the prayer one because I was shocked actually by a lot of the things that we're about to see here. But I was shocked especially by the prayer one because I'm like, okay, I feel like on that side, whether it's Roman Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy or even Oriental Orthodoxy, what have you, they have a lot more people that they pray to, right? I mean, they pray to Mary a lot. They have a lot of other people that they presumably spend time in prayer to. They have to divvy up prayers to different people. And so you'd think that there would be a heck of a lot more praying going on in these traditions than in evangelical Protestantism. And so, let's look. Well, their stats are actually not that bad on this question, right? So if you look, 51% of Roman Catholics pray at least daily. 53% of Orthodox pray at least daily. So that's at least significantly better than the church attendance and the scripture reading. Well, let's compare that to evangelical Protestants. While 51% of Roman Catholics pray at least daily, 72% of evangelical Protestants pray at least daily. And so even on prayer, evangelical Protestants perform significantly better. So this means that if we compared a group of 1,000 Roman Catholics, 1,000 Orthodox, and 1,000 evangelical Protestants, there would be approximately 200 more sort of people in the daily prayer category in the evangelical Protestant group than in each of the other 2 groups. And so now that we've looked at a few of these markers of piety, okay, like very basic things that nobody would dispute are the core of piety, okay, let's look at how they compare on several important social issues. And we'll try to maybe speed through some of these. So political ideology, when we look at Roman Catholics, okay, despite of however many of us are involved in this sort of polemic scene, and all we ever see are the rad trads on Twitter, cage stage rad trads, arguing with other cage stage rad trads, and so on and so forth. In spite of that, less than half of Roman Catholics and Orthodox self-identify as conservative, with only 36% of Roman Catholics doing so, only 32% of Orthodox doing so. By comparison, 59% of evangelical Protestants self-identify as conservative. And on the opposite end of the aisle, okay, 18% of Roman Catholics self-identify as liberal, 19% of Orthodox self-identify as liberal. By comparison, only 7% of evangelical Protestants self-identify as liberal. Percentage-wise, this means that the proportion of liberal Roman Catholics and Orthodox is more than double that of evangelical Protestants. And so again, now when it comes to political ideology, now that's obviously not a marker of like, yes, of course, if you're a card-carrying conservative, that must mean that therefore you're super pious. No, we're not saying that. But again, these things tend to kind of correlate with other social views that people have, right? And other social tendencies they tend to have. And we're going to see that reflected here as well, because it's not just political ideology, it's related topics such as the view on homosexuality among Roman Catholics. And so what we see here, okay, is that more than half of Roman Catholics think that homosexuality should be accepted in society. I mean, look at that percentage. That is 74% of Roman Catholics think that homosexuality should be accepted in society. That's a lot. Okay, let's compare that to evangelical Protestants. Only 36% think it should be accepted. Now, while for Roman Catholics, only 23% think that it should be discouraged. For evangelical Protestants, that number is 61% think that it should be discouraged. Okay, now let's look here about specifically on same-sex marriage. 70% of Roman Catholics say that same-sex marriage is something that they strongly favor. This means that for every 1,000 members of their group, 700 of them support same-sex marriage. That's a really big deal. And if you even look at the Orthodox numbers here, 500 out of a group of 1,000 Orthodox, 580 of them would support same-sex marriage. Okay. Now, by comparison, let's look at the evangelical Protestants on this issue. Less than half of evangelical Protestants support same-sex marriage. Only 36% think that it should be accepted by society. It's actually the same percentage favoring homosexuality, if I remember correctly, from what we were looking at there. Now we see, here we see, DoorDash Thomas asks, thank you for the $4.99 super chat. He has said the statistics identify the percentage of Catholics who are fascist groypers. That is the category that he says Kevin Wagner, CT, I think is classical theist, and him fall under. I don't believe that the study had a groyper category, but if you notice here, though, I mean, I just don't see how that would factor into, for example, the same-sex marriage question or the homosexuality question. Even if I go back really quickly to the, let me see here, political ideology question, the answers that were given were conservative, moderate, liberal, no answer. I would assume if you get especially like sort of like rabid groyper types who may say, we're not conservatives or what have you, I would assume they would just do no answer. And I would assume they're not the only ones who would do no answer, right? I mean, presumably you would also have, let's say, leftist Roman Catholics and stuff who would put no answer because they don't fit in here either. And yet that's only 4% of the people here that responded. So, all right. With that, let's go on to the next thing here. So, what about
Javier?
Yeah,
can I make a quick note on something that he said that I think is worth pointing out? I think, while of course we're joking and being humorous there, I think it actually does demonstrate, though, that there is still this sort of like, I don't want to call it fracturing because it isn't in the proper sense, at least in all cases, but there are these people, this purity of minority sort of fascination we'll see that they might be talking about. Even these sorts of people, especially in Rome, flock to these smaller sort of like fraternal groups or like societies or fellowships within the Roman communion to sort of escape what we're seeing here in the majority of Romanism, where we'll see people flock to things like the SSPX that are in kind of goofy canonical status, or the FSSP where the Latin Mass is still allowed. You'll see people in these factions arguing for the victory and the purity and the glory of these factions like Romanism, and yet to avoid what I think is the clear reality that we're seeing in the data here, even within this greater group that they're trying to defend, their own views are so not familiar, and the whole group is so unfriendly to the opinions of this pure minority, that they have to flock to these smaller bubbles of conservatism and traditionalism, because their church as a whole simply does not seem to align with the views of this small minority. So we could joke about, what about the Groypers and the rad trads and the fascists and all this, but there is actually a small nugget of truth that the people screaming online about these supposed victories and realities are actually isolating themselves in smaller groups, because the reality for the whole Roman Church doesn't reflect the opinions of these little minority groups. So they have to make these little bubbles.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this, actually, to be charitable to them, I think in a lot of cases, at least in our post algorithmic society here on social media, I'm not even sure a lot of them are exactly curating these. I think these are being curated for them, right? Because their algorithm figures out that, okay, maybe for someone who, let's say, is on the far right side of things, right, or the far left, or what have you, right? Odds are that they have stuff that really upsets them that they see, and so the algorithm figures out, okay, this guy gets upset by some of this stuff, and so I'm going to show that to him more because it keeps him on here more. We get to show him more ads. But also on the opposite side of that, there are things that they really, really believe in that get them fired up, and it keeps them on the app longer. And so I'm going to show them more of that stuff, right? And so the algorithm begins to curate this for us, and then we end up, unfortunately, in this sort of internet pseudo-reality where we can become convinced that, oh my goodness, everyone agrees with me on this topic. Why? Because the algorithm figured out that I like seeing that sort of thing. And so it's feeding it to me more and more and more. And it's if I'm not very intentional about I don't know, going out, checking in on sources from the other side, listening to what they're saying. Like I'll give you guys an example, actually. Because we were talking about like political ideology and stuff here a second ago. It was kind of fascinating for me because there are conservative pundits that I tune in for. There are leftist commentators I tune in for. It's just, I'm curious what everyone's saying. And what the perceptions are of each side when it comes to the opposite side, what their self-perception of their own side is. And what was kind of fascinating is paying attention, because I haven't been paying too much attention to politics, but especially when the election was happening and we're getting down to the wire. Then I tuned in, and I was still tuned in a little bit after the election, and so on and so forth. What was fascinating to me is seeing in the lead up to it, because it was a toss-up. No one knew how it was going to go, right? Even that night, you look at all these pundits saying, "Ooh, we really hope our guy wins, but it could go either way." And what's fascinating is what I saw in the lead up to this, and for years, is on the conservative pundit side, they're like, the left is so well organized, and everyone they fall into position, into rank, and this is why we haven't been doing so well before, because and that's why we lost the last election, because they're so well organized and everyone falls in line. And then meanwhile, watching the leftist commentators and even the liberal commentators, what they're saying is, the right is so well organized, everyone falls in line over there, no one falls in line on our side. This is ridiculous. This is why we lose. And so I'm like, this is really fascinating, right? Because I think everyone functioning inside of their own bubble has this sort of take on the other side. So it's kind of interesting to me to be like, the other side thinks that we're like super well put together, and our side thinks we're not, and they think the same thing, right, for them. And so it was kind of interesting. And so you see some of these exact opposite reality, parallel reality sort of situation when it comes to perception on the other side. And I wonder how much of it is due to their algorithms, and maybe their far left algorithms that they're being shown, or what have you. And so it's kind of interesting. Now let's go on here with a little bit more of this data. So we see here not just same-sex marriage, well, abortion. Okay, let's look at pro-life issues. Because I'll say this, and I have to give it to them. Okay. Roman Catholic apologist, especially Trent Horn. Trent Horn is so good on pro-life issues. Okay, I have to give it to him. If I had the chance, I guess, to be like, you get to pick one person to debate the best sort of pro-choice person from the other side, I would probably pick Trent Horn. All right, I got to give it to him. He's awesome on pro-life stuff. Does great work there. And so because of people like Trent Horn and other Roman Catholics you see, especially online, and there is a lot of involvement we see from Roman Catholics with pro-life groups, okay, I'm like, okay, I expected the stats to be really, really good for them when it comes to pro-life issues, because I'm so familiar with these people. These are the people in my algorithm, and I'm familiar with their work. And I'm like, wow, this is great. I hear even from, you can listen to even some of the most virulently anti-Roman Catholic groups, whether IFBs or whatever, and they find themselves rubbing shoulders with Roman Catholics and pro-life work. So you'd think that it would be a large percentage who are pro-life. And yet, what do we see from the data? It turns out from those surveyed here, from 2023 to 2024, that 59% of Roman Catholics believe abortion should be legal in all or most cases. That's over a little bit over half of Roman Catholics believe that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. And it doesn't look better for the Orthodox either. It's 60% of Orthodox think that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. When it comes to it being illegal in all or most cases, only 39% of Roman Catholics think it should be illegal in all or most cases. That's less than half. And to be honest with you guys, I was really shocked by this. I was really shocked for the reasons that I already stated. Okay. And so, well, let's compare that. So we see 59% of Roman Catholics believe that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. What about evangelical Protestants? By comparison, only 33% of evangelical Protestants believe abortion should be legal in all or most cases. In other words, around 1/3. So for Roman Catholics, it's more than half of them believe abortion should be legal in all or most cases. For evangelical Protestants, this umbrella term, only 1/3 believe that it should be legal in most or all cases. And so, again, it's very unfortunate there, to be totally honest, because I think that's actually one of those issues. Actually, I thought, right, just like opposing same-sex marriage and these sorts of things, where all of us really should be kind of like linking arms and trying to, in a sense, coalition build together, right, against these evils in society. And yet, unfortunately, we see that failing on the other side. So, all right, so that's abortion. Now let's look at marital status. It's another thing that you hear all the time. Okay, so let's look at marital status here. What we see is that among Roman Catholics, only 11% of Roman Catholics are divorced and separated. So that's actually, honestly, pretty good. Okay, only 11% are divorced or separated. With the Orthodox, it's 15% are divorced and separated. Well, let's look at the evangelical Protestants. 12% are divorced/separated. And so that's kind of interesting, because actually on this point, they win by 1%. But then I'll ask this. For people where this is their backup is, all these people that are leaving are simply the quote unquote bad Catholics, the ones that are really lax, the ones that don't actually keep up with our teaching. Wouldn't you expect the numbers then in both of these groups to be drastically different? Why are they so similar? Why is it only a 1% difference? Why is that within like margin of error there? Just something to consider. Okay. So, all right. Now I will say though, and I didn't get it, I think I didn't put a graph on this, but people can go to the religious landscape study and check this out. I was actually a little curious, as it turns out, funnily enough, and I was actually surprised by this too. I thought it was going to be probably like identical, just like it was for the umbrella category. If you compare Rome to evangelical Lutherans, only 8% of evangelical Lutherans are divorced or separated. And so specifically there, if we do a tradition to tradition comparison, only 8% of evangelical Lutherans are. So that means that the Roman Catholic percentage is just a tiny bit higher. But again, I don't think it's like this drastic difference or anything like that. So, all right, that was marriage. Now we see here from Ryan Burge, I included this here at the end as well. So he brings up the fact that this is from a survey from the National Survey of Religious Leaders from 2019 through 2020. So it's a little bit dated by a few years, but it was surveying like pastors, like clergy. 93% of evangelical pastors say that they believe in hell. 90% of Black Protestants do. Only 70% of Catholic priests believe in hell, which is kind of an interesting number there. So we have that reality there as well. Let me see here. And that's just, that graph kind of like zoomed in. right? We have here from Dr. Steve Parks. I'm sure that 1% is easily offset by annulments. Well, there you go. Thank you for the $10 super chat. In any case, again, divorce and remarriage and this sort of thing. Obviously, like divorce is never good. It's always a sad thing. We're not being triumphalistic here. We're not being triumphalistic here, even on the belief of hell, right? Like that's really bad. I mean, and for the sake of fairness here, on the belief of hell part, if we look over here, 45% of mainline pastors, although obviously, I mean, the evangelical Protestants don't really, for the most part, have communion with a lot of the mainlines, but 45% of them say that they believe in hell. So it's actually worse for specifically the mainline pastors. But among evangelical pastors, 93% believe in hell. And there's a bunch of other data that we could go into specifically on beliefs as well. One that I thought I had on these slides, but I didn't. So let me just really quickly switch here to my article. Give me just 1 second here. Even on something like birth control, I found some interesting stuff because this is another one that always gets brought up. Okay. So we're going to be relying here on two other studies. So this is from the there's a 2011 Guttmacher Institute analysis of data from the federal government's National Survey of Family Growth on this question of birth control. Found the following quote: among women who are currently at risk of unintended pregnancy, 88% overall and 87% of Catholics use a method other than natural family planning. Among all women who are at risk of unintended pregnancy, 69%, including 68% of Catholics, are currently using a highly effective contraceptive method, male or female sterilization, the IUD, the pill, or another hormonal method. Another 14%, 15% among Catholics, are relying on condoms, and 4% among Catholics are relying on other methods, such as withdrawal. Only 1% of all women at a risk of unintended pregnancy, that is 2% of Roman Catholics, use natural family planning, the only method of contraception sanctioned by the Catholic hierarchy, end quote. And according to slightly more recent data from the National Survey on Family Growth from 2015 to 2017, contraceptive use remains fairly comparable between Roman Catholics and evangelical Protestants. Let me see if I can, might not be able to zoom in on that a whole ton more than I already have. And hopefully you guys can see that a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and zoom back out. When asked if they use condoms as a form of birth control, 92% of Roman Catholics said that they do. By comparison, 95% of evangelical Protestants said they do so. Again, incredibly similar rates here. When asked if they used withdrawal as a form of birth control, 62% of Roman Catholics said they do. By comparison, 66% of evangelical Protestants said they do so. When asked if they use the birth control pill as a form of birth control, 68% of Roman Catholics said they do. By comparison, 74% of evangelical Protestants said they do so. And so as I point out in the study here, we can see that Roman Catholics slightly outperform evangelical Protestants. However, even on this question of contraception, we can see that it is that reality is not unilaterally the case. 23% of Roman Catholics utilize Plan B, whereas only 19% of evangelical Protestants do so. Okay. In fact, the only group more likely to use emergency contraception than Roman Catholics were those of no religious affiliation, who report in at 29%. And so even on that issue of contraception, which again, I'm not actually weighing in here as to like whether it's always evil to use contraception or not, or anything like that, right? Just talking here about the Roman Catholic understanding of things, okay? This is just way too similar to the evangelical Protestant rates to be justifying, or rather, it's too similar to try to justify these sort of narratives of like, oh, everyone that's left us, that's gone over to you, is just because they're all lax. It's like, well, if that's the case, why are our numbers so similar? And that's so similar in spite of the fact that you've lost a bunch of these people, and supposedly the ones that remain, the ones that are answering, saying, yes, I am a Roman Catholic, they're supposed to be this hyper pious core, according to this backup argument. And yet they're the ones answering this way. So again, that's not very good. Now, really quickly, just so that we know, for the landscape studies, I want to be fully transparent here. Here are the margins of error. So for Roman Catholics, there's a 1.7 percentage point margin of error. That's really, really good, actually. For evangelical Protestants, there's a 1.5% margin of error. And then for the Orthodox, because they were able to get a smaller number of Orthodox, there's a 9.9 percentage point margin of error. Specifically for what we've been talking about here in the second half of the stream, this question of the piety. Okay, when it comes to this, as I point out in my article, add or subtract the margins of error as generously as you want. evangelical Protestants would still perform better than Roman Catholics and Orthodox on all of the above listed pure research categories when it comes to piety, with the exception of people who are currently divorced/separated. But even when it comes to this category, the stats for each would still be remarkably close to each other, even if you play with the margin of error. So, all right, lots of data, lots of stuff that we just went through from, again, several different studies. If we wanted to, we could sit here for hours and hours and hours pulling up more and more and more data. No matter which way you slice it, things are just not looking good. Okay, if we're honest, this sort of like postmodern society, again, thank God we're seeing the decline of Christianity slowing down, it seems, from what I understand, coming to a pause, which is great. Praise the Lord for that, right? However, even with that, Christianity for a long time has not been doing amazing in America and has not been doing amazing across the world. But when it comes to this question of, is specifically Roman Catholicism taking over America, the answer is just no. The answer is no, not even close. And is the backup reality of, oh, well, are all of these people then simply, they're just being left with a hyper pious, ultra Thomistic, trad-based core? No, that's not true either. Okay. And it's actually, and again, it brings me no joy, actually. Like, all jokes aside, like, I joke around with some of these claims that the other side makes because they're so outrageous. But all jokes aside, it actually doesn't make me happy. Okay. To see Roman Catholic priests, like 30% of them not believing in hell. It doesn't make me happy to see Roman Catholics softening on abortion, softening on same-sex marriage, softening on any of these issues. That doesn't make me happy at all. Because at the end of the day, Christians, especially for a lot of these very important social issues, well, we should be standing together against the evils of society on these issues. And so it's not a good thing. But when it comes specifically to, are people actually telling the truth on the other side with these triumphalist narratives? We have to do streams like these because we just need to stand by the truth. And the truth is, no, they are not. They're not doing better than evangelical Protestants. I would argue that they're not doing well, period, like at all, across the board. So in any case, with all of that, I feel like I've done a lot of talking right now. Do you guys have any thoughts on that before we move on to maybe just a couple discussion questions I have here for us?
Can I say something on the nature of like data and the validation, all that stuff, just for reference for people? Because I think that's important. So as I've mentioned, for a living, I'm a data analyst. There are different kinds of data analysts. So I'm more of like a business intelligence analyst. So I do things with like SQL, Power BI, and basically take like raw data, make it like readable for users in a company. But I have a lot of experience with data validation and understanding when we should question things, where, like, what are the signals that data is off? Because sometimes gut instincts can be correct as opposed to the data that you're seeing. An instance of that, well, I'll say this. Sometimes people really clown on anecdotes entirely, but anecdotal data is actually extremely valuable at times. So the example of Nicholas Nassim Taleb, of course, the black swan. If somebody says to you, every single swan is black, or sorry, every single swan is white, and then you are able to give complete irrefutable evidence that there is a black swan, that massively disproves that one so-called statistic of 100% of swans are white. And I think in more realistic cases, take this kind of data and let's say that instead you restrict it down to like, all right, how is like a 10 block radius of Catholic churches growing? Let's say that you're in the know, you go to the churches, the priests, all that kind of stuff, and you see it's growing really well. Like each time you go, it feels like there are more people there. And then you see some data that comes out. Again, this is just hypothetical. Who's actually putting this kind of data out? Who knows? And you see, the numbers look like they're shockingly declining. Given your experience in that small area, like your gut instincts can actually be useful and say, okay, maybe something's off here. I don't necessarily know why it's off, but I can look into the data and am I warranted in seeing, like, are they filtering something down wrong? Are their calculations not working? Something like that. Are they just excluding data for some reason? That stuff happens all the time during the process of development. So I constantly have to validate numbers all over the place. And I work with financial stuff. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're right. Now, try to take that. I don't think you can have a gut instinct about the entirety of the United States. Like, you can have a gut instinct about, as I said, 10 blocks. You can have a gut instinct about like something you're a really good expert in, like your own financials or something like that. But if we're talking about the entirety of the United States and just saying, oh, my church is growing, therefore it's reasonable to say the entirety of the Roman Catholic Church is growing, that's really not a good way to do things, and it's not warranted. Does it mean you're automatically wrong? No, but it doesn't mean that you're warranted in questioning that data per se. And so I don't want people to think that we clown on anecdotes and that, if reality is different, that we just, statistics are infallible, but we have to have reasons to think that Pew has done these statistics wrong. And I don't really see anything from everything I've seen that indicates such.
And again, if new data were to come out that says, oh my goodness, there's a wave of Protestants coming in, I think we'd be the first people talking about it because, the same way, to be honest, like even the same way that I think it was Eric Sammons that I showed earlier, the same way that he's sounding the alarm, he didn't write that article in Crisis Magazine because, he wanted to throw a wrench in Roman Catholic apologetics on X. No, he wrote that because he cares about his tradition, right? And so when he sees this data, he's like, we have to sound the alarm because we need to do something about this. And so if we saw, let's say, especially for those of us in the niche of a niche of a niche that is Protestant apologetics, okay, if we saw people just flocking to Roman Catholicism, like Eric Sammons is doing for his side, we would be sounding the alarm. We'd be shouting from the rooftops, like someone needs to do something about this. We need to devote more resources to apologetics, or we need to put out more books. We need to have more conferences. We need to do more video. We would be talking about it too. And I'll say this, just to be honest with the people out there, if over the next few years, data comes out and, oh my gosh, these trends completely reversed and Roman Catholics are actually gaining, I would be interested in doing a stream on that or writing an article on that or doing a video dedicated to that, because I think we should care about the data and we should actually care about being honest. And it doesn't do any of us any favors. I mean, let's say that a bunch of Protestants were flocking to Roman Catholicism. If we just stuck our heads in the sand, pretend that it didn't exist, and said, well, I have some more people at my church that are joining up, my individual church, we would be doing a disservice to our own side, because that's not what our side would need in that moment, right? Our side would need actually for someone to be a faithful watchman on the walls sounding the alarm, not for the watchman to fall asleep because he's like, I would like to think the hordes are not at the gates right now, right? No, that's not what we should be doing. So, all right, we see really quickly. Thank you so much for the $9.99 super chat here from Andy saying, we face a new challenge in the West, meta-modernism, a generation that believes and doubts at the same time. And in that instability, the algorithm forms them before they ever form their own beliefs. That's really insightful. Yeah, absolutely. It's, to be honest with you guys, it's kind of scary. Like, I'm going to be totally honest. Like, I'm sure all of us here, we make videos on YouTube because we know that there are people on YouTube. And as long as they're going to be there, we might as well try to do something that edifies them and something that helps them. But I don't know about everyone else on this panel, but truth be told, like earlier this year, I went I think 4 months or something without being on social media practically at all, except to just post on my videos. Lately, I haven't been as good about that. I've been tweeting a little bit more and DMing a little bit more. But for a little while now, for me personally, I've started to become more and more anti-social media and more anti because of what algorithms do and the way that they just create these false perceptions. It might actually be worth it here. Zach, do you maybe want to talk a little bit about the sort of bot issue that we see online with algorithms and this sort of thing, and then I'll try to see if I can find my article on the topic.
Yeah, pretty much. With the rise of AI, you're going to have, and I just remember a scene from your post there where it's like you just get these fake AI bots that will literally push things to make you believe something. Like, it's going into that rabbit hole where it's like you're pushing a narrative and you're gonna want people to you want people to be selective about this narrative. And so what you do is, if I can't get a real person there, you can just buy bots, or sometimes companies like Facebook and whatnot will just create them, and suddenly you're arguing with somebody who you think is real. And this goes into some of my points I have in my notes, and it goes with the meta-modernism as well, is no one goes beyond a first click. So they just see, Jerry Jones, the hyper, like psycho Roman Catholic, who's just, Rome, and then you're arguing with this person going back and forth. But if you click on their, profile, man, that kind of looks like an AI person. There's little marks that look wrong, or the profile was made 10 minutes ago, and you're like, wait a minute, is this a new profile? And then you start, and sometimes the really freaky part is when you look at the friends list, sometimes you can see other bots there. I know of one thing, this is actually a long time ago. It was this channel that had this picture of this woman, and it was tweeting like thousands of tweets a day, and it was friends with itself to like the thousands. And it's like, that was 10 years ago. AI is advanced way beyond that. So, you know, I kind of have a personal rule myself, especially where it's like, if it's a faceless person on X just raging, I don't even know if that's a real person or not. And to be honest, I don't have any worth engaging with it, because it's like, well, even if that is a real person, you know, most of the time the faceless opinions are trash anyway. But at the same time, it's like, I could be falling into the trap of talking to somebody who literally doesn't exist. And when you get that algorithm going, suddenly you're trapped in like this like AI meta hell where you're in this world of fake people literally arguing with you every day, and like you won't know unless you actually do the research that, like I said, that many people won't even do to, you know, figure out whether this person's is real or not.
To back what you're saying, and just to be clear here, okay, for a bunch of these, this is like the only video I've seen or whatever from some of these accounts. So it's not like I'm out here saying, oh, we're endorsing everything these guys are doing. No, but just these one videos. If you have never thought of this issue of, are the people I'm arguing with, or the people that I'm letting unsettle me, the people that I'm letting change my worldview, are they even people? If you've never asked that question and you want to get a little bit spooked, here's a few videos that you can watch. There's this video titled Reddit is a PSYOP, okay, by this guy named Flesh Simulator. I think it's like the only video I've seen from this guy. But go ahead and watch this video. It's like 8 minutes. Another one as well. There's this video from Some Ordinary Gamers titled The Internet is Slowly Dying. And then finally, and again, obviously, this next one is from a leftist commentator who I would disagree with on like 1.5 million things. That being said, though, this particular video titled Destiny's Schizo Arc, okay? Guys, straight up, if you've never thought on this topic and you want to get pretty spooked, it's only 12 minutes. I recommend go watch this, because it's like, apparently it's from some stream that he did at some point where he is figuring out live on air that this YouTube channel and a bunch of these X accounts and a bunch of the stuff are just fake. They're just bots. And he's finding this out, like looking at the pictures like Zach is talking about and looking at the way that these people interact on X. And it's pretty scary because you don't know how many of them are real. Another thing I'll say as well is from NBC News. Researchers secretly infiltrated a popular Reddit forum with AI bots, causing an outrage to the point where Reddit was considering legal action. I don't know if they actually took it or not, against this group of researchers. And we're not going to read the whole article, but and this was posted this year in April of 2025. It says, in recent months, a group of researchers conducted a secret experiment on Reddit to see how artificial intelligence can be used to influence human opinion. Now Reddit says it's considering legal action. These were researchers from the University of Zurich, and they deployed a slew of AI bots posing as real people and engaging with users without their knowledge or consent to try to change minds on the popular Reddit forum r/ChangeMyMind. These are just a few bots. They left more than 1,000 comments. They on all sorts of controversial topics, including, and this was kind of wild. One AI bot, under the username that left a lengthy comment arguing against the opinion that AI should never interact with humans on social media, right, and so on and so forth. And so, what are you left with here? I mean, even in a subreddit where the whole point of it is r/ChangeMyMind, who knows? 1,000 comments at least from a few bots. Who knows how many people had a drastic change in their worldview?
And it's not
talking
just
to a thing that's not even alive.
And it's not
right?
really just tweets either. It's videos and photos and everything. Like, you know, the Sora app, it's really scary how many people think those videos are real.
Yeah.
And like, this is the same app that is literally showing videos of dogs shooting water out of their mouth with a fire hose. You know, something goofy like that. But like, people will use, like, because this thing just happened recently where there was a video of allegedly like all of these bald eagles on this golf course, and people thought it was a real thing, but it wasn't. It was all fake. And so it's like, it gets into this, like, how can I even trust the video I'm watching? You know, we're about to make everybody get really schizophrenic in the chat, in the comments, but it's like, you could be the only person talking here. You know, Adam and I and Jared, we could all be fake, like AI. Like, that is how good AI is getting lately. Where it's like,
it's only going to get better, and our situation is only going to get worse, by the way. Because I don't know if you guys remember, like, people were making, you know, and I was one of those people when the ChatGPT and stuff was first coming out, and we're like, haha, make me a picture or a video of, I don't know, a celebrity eating pasta or whatever. And it's like the most glitchy, horrible, like, nightmare fuel. and now they're really good videos. Now they're almost indistinguishable, and it's only going to get worse as time goes on.
Wait until you hear the AI blues covers.
Oh,
Like I mean, personally, I think they're pretty good. But it's like, if I was to show you one and not tell you it's a blue AI's cover, honestly, with some of these, you won't even know. You would think it's literally a real person.
there was a wonderful video that this was 2 years ago for the record, that I found. This one was Mr. Krabs sings Billie Jean, and it was really good. It's pretty wonderful. It's pretty good. You got to listen to it. It's actually funny, but I'm not somebody that's like, oh yeah, watch a bunch of AI slop, but it's actually kind of funny. But yeah,
like only this one instance of AI.
This one instance. But before I forget, and I apologize if you hear our cat in the back, he is loud. He's a former stray, so be here like meow, just constant. But so I thought I would just shout out the guy that gave you, I think it was $10, Andy. Recommend his YouTube channel at Andy Ashenden. He has philosophy videos. Yeah, he has philosophy videos. He's going through, or he has gone through some of John of Damascus's on the Orthodox faith. Right now he's doing stuff with an Old Testament scholar actually on the Book of Revelation and so on. So he has good stuff. Just wanted to shout him out while we're here.
And I'm hoping, I'm talking to him right now in DMs. I'm hoping to have him on sometime maybe next year, because he's, he has a lot of projects and stuff going on. So that'll be cool. So we have a $5 super chat here from James Austin. Thank you so much for that, James. It says, thanks for the video. I'm reconsidering my decision to revert to Rome, considering the factors that led me to that. Please pray for discernment. We'll do, everyone, please, on your own time, pray for James. I appreciate the $5 super chat there. Yeah, I mean, again, guys, the one thing I'll say as well, since you mentioned that, James, is, guys, whether you are leaving Rome to become Anglican, to become Lutheran, whether you're thinking of doing the opposite, leaving Lutheranism to go to Rome, or leaving, no matter which way you're going on this religious switching sort of thing, this is for everybody at home. Please listen to me. Do not, and I want to repeat this again, do not do that based on social pressure, based on peer pressure. Do not do that. We're literally talking about the fate of your eternal soul. Do not do that. Okay? Like, I am literally begging you. You do not want to stand on Judgment Day and be like, how can I not do this? Base Crusader 420 told me to do this. Like, no.
I'll even point out, Javier, and this actually applies both to what James said and to what we were just talking about. Recently, as I'm going through seminary, something I had to do was I had to sort of recount timelines of like milestones, like when was my confirmation, when was my baptism, when did these convictions happen. So one thing I did to sort of help me like map out my timeline was I went through all of my YouTube comment history, so I could start like cataloging where my thoughts were changing. And looking back on this, it's actually kind of cool. You could see every comment you've ever made in a single list. I went back and I looked at some dialogues that I had, some back and forths, especially on topics that used to make me nervous or that I used to not have an answer to. I'd revisit these dialogues and try to figure out, are they still good objections or not? And in a good number of these dialogues that I spent probably days going back and forth with a single interlocutor, in this journey, I would click these people's accounts now, to Zach's point, and I would realize I was the only person they'd ever spoken to, and their account only existed, the day that they started dialoguing with me. And I would find more and more and more of these people with no videos, no friends, no subscribers, and just comment chains. And by the end of it, after I think my current YouTube channel's existed for like 3 years or so, going through a full 3-year journey of all my comments, I would hazard a guess I've probably spent weeks worth of hours just arguing with and debating people who don't exist. And not only that, being compelled, made nervous, and feeling angst about what these non-people were saying to me. That at a certain point in my life, my very convictions were challenged by the opinions of someone that doesn't exist. That's a terrifying reality, both for the impact that it has on a person's mental state, but also the fact that I just wasted all that time that could have been spent with my family, with my friends, with my wife, with my job, doing homework, studying, reading, anything. But I spent it going back and forth with someone who doesn't exist. And I can't, it ails me to think that there are people who are probably in fellowship with a communion, with a church, who are there because of an argument that they had with a robot. That is a horrifying, terrifying reality to me. And that's why, to your point earlier, I just want everyone to be so careful in doing this, in navigating this and spend less time in comment sections and more time in books and articles, and do this prayerfully. And if you're going to make a leap, don't do it without tons of time with your pastor, with small groups in your church, with actual people you can look at and talk over camera or something. Because if you spend all your time in text walls with comment sections, Redditors, and X posts, the evangelist who converted you might not even exist. And that, like you said, I don't want to stand on Judgment Day and answer for my actions on behalf of something that a robot told me to do. That's horrifying.
Well, I think even worse than that is bringing this all back to the whole point of this video of like people converting. There are people out there that's just like, what are the propagandists that put out these false numbers that you showed earlier? What are they doing? They're just trying to pressure you on the basis of numbers. They're not even giving you real arguments on the basis of like, because okay, theoretically, maybe I'll give a bit of a counterpoint here, but theoretically somebody could say, or a bot could give you an actual good point on something. They could give you a legitimate, like, something that you had not thought of. Like they cite a Bible verse on something that you had not thought of. You're like, oh, that actually does hit. Even if it's a bot, that doesn't matter if scripture says it. But if you're just doing it purely on the basis of like numbers on your interactions, that's like horrific. And the examples that we see in the Old Testament, the New Testament all the time are, and the words of Christ, narrow is the way. You have times in, I don't remember the stories perfectly of the names and everything, but you have times in like First Kings. What's the story of, I think it was Ahab and Jehoshaphat or something like that, where you have Micaiah, I think it was a prophet, and he's like one prophet that's true and like 400 false ones or something like that. I could be completely wrong in the Old Testament names, but you get the point, right? Like you can have cases where everybody else is a specific religion and that turns out to be wrong. And on Judgment Day, you're going to have to answer that. And so we're not just trying to scare you and be like, oh, well, for one, we're not saying the bigger church is therefore false. We're not saying that, you can't convert to another church and enjoy the fact that your church is growing. But to say I converted because this church is growing is a really big issue that you should not let yourself fall into.
And I was actually, it's kind of what you mentioned, because I was just about to say, right, like I could see someone saying like, well, but if a bot gives me a syllogism, the syllogism stands. Yeah, of course, we're not doing the genetic fallacy. But let's be honest here. How often are we seeing syllogisms on X or YouTube comment sections? How often are we? Practically never, right? Almost never. A lot of the interactions that we're having are incredibly shallow. They just make us mad. People are not using any real arguments, right? And to Jared's point, how often do we see in the Old Testament where you have people who are in the minority? Moses comes down from the mountain, and he had to be an intercessor on behalf of the people on Mount Sinai, because God said, they're all worshiping the golden calf. I'm just going to do away with them, and we're going to restart with you. Moses versus the entire nation, right? Even then, when Moses says, after he comes down and rebukes them and grinds the statue into dust and makes them drink it and so on and so forth, and even then he asks, who stands with the Lord? Stand by me here today. And thousands of them do not. Okay? And so we see the crowds making really bad decisions all over the Bible. And even otherwise important seeming crowds. The Sanhedrin, okay? Making horrible decisions, rejecting Jesus. And so, again, what we should care about ultimately is, yes, we should be in prayer. We should be fasting when we're thinking about these decisions. We should care about the arguments. We should read old books, especially, guys, please, I want to tell you this. Read old books by old dead guys that are not going to let you down, that finished the race well, okay, who are alive with Christ, and see what they have to say on these topics. Read, if you're a Lutheran or interested in Lutheranism, read people like Johann Gerhard. Read people like Martin Chemnitz. Read the Lutheran Confessions, the Book of Concord, right? Philip Melanchthon, the Augsburg Confession, an apology of the Augsburg Confession. Go and read these. Familiarize yourself with their arguments. If you're going to look at Rome, go look at what they have to say. Go look at Robert Bellarmine. If you want to get a taste of the Counter-Reformation, go look at, I know right now, all the rage with all the young Thomists on our side of YouTube is Father Scheeben, or maybe go check out his dogmatic text or whatever. But do your homework. This is, again, the fate of your eternal soul. And I think there are so many people that are swayed, not just by aesthetics and this sort of thing, but really are swayed by peer pressure. Because a lot of the time, that's kind of how we're wired. The Lord wired us to be communal beings. and we live in these communities. And so, for example, if there's this movement in your community, let's say, where, I don't know, everyone's saying like, I don't know, don't drink this water because I think it's going to make people sick. Well, your brain is kind of wired to be like, dang, maybe I should be skeptical of this water. Everyone in my community is telling me that it's making them sick, right? That sort of stuff begins to break down when you're talking about the internet, when you're talking about bots, or even if it's just real people, but real people from completely different walks of life, different people that are coming with completely different educational backgrounds. You don't even know like what they've read and what they haven't. It's just a different story, right? And so I would just encourage you, like, go read books, go talk to your pastor, and actually live in community, touch grass, live in real life. I would recommend. And it's okay to have friends online. I mean, all of us met online, right? So I'm not saying don't have friends online, but even if you're going to do that, at least try to have quality conversations, get to know the people that you're talking to, and actually work through these things, So, all right, well, here, a few questions then for you guys in light of all of this. So when it comes to this question of evangelistic practices, I mean, because from what we looked at, it does seem that Protestants, even though, again, and just to say one final time, we're not being triumphalistic here or anything, but I am curious, what is your take here on why it does seem that Protestants actually are doing better overall when it comes to converting people that were not raised religious at all, or even in getting people that are, cradle Catholics turned Protestant? Why do you think that sort of stuff is the case?
I certainly think that at least for Rome, the East is a little more insulated from this. But I think the way piety works in the Roman system, generally speaking, but not how it's not talking about Rome in its most ideal form. I'm talking about how most people experience the Roman Catholic Church. It can be very sort of algorithmic and very cookie cutter, like follow these steps and you'll be fine. So people can enter into the Roman Church and the experience can be very shallow. And at least as far as their priest and community are communicating to them, that's enough. And that doesn't always cultivate a really deep and thorough faith, I suppose. So I think that's a big cause for why people fall away, is it's more of just going through the motions rather than having this deep and profound communion with God. That I think the reformational side of things, Protestants do a much better job focusing on and articulating, because the way we relate to God is a little less cookie cutter, I guess, or a little less, I'm trying to think of the word, step by step, algorithmic, however you want to think of it. So in terms of the inclusion of people in the life of the church, I feel that it's more joyful, welcoming, and encouraged as an experiential thing rather than just something you do because you have to do. And I think that plays a big part into why people seem to stay Protestant and why people who leave Rome end up finding their way to Protestantism as often as they do.
Well, I think a lot of the time, and Javier, I'm sending you a message in your DMs, just to kind of use the example of what I'm about to say. I don't know if you can pull that up at all, but pretty much to Adam's point there, when you look at the big, so what you look at two narratives going on. You get the base trad Roman guys who are out conquering America or something like that, and then you just get the reality with Roman Catholicism, and oftentimes it just sounds convoluted and self-contradicting. So that picture I sent you, if you can get that up there, they'll continuously deny and say, oh, we don't worship Mary, like a god or anything like that, which is, I mean, it's true. But then you get pictures like this where it goes, oh, I belong to the cult of the Virgin Mary. And even then, when your Baptist grandma starts freaking out, being like, look, the Roman Catholics worship Mary, the Roman Catholic will go, no, we don't worship Mary. Well, I mean, we do, but it's not the right, like the way you think worship is, but it's actually this way. And if you go and it just starts going down the convoluted trail, and again, like with other things where it's like, oh, Pope Leo, he's the base conservative pope. I heard that for a little bit in the beginning because he was wearing all the vestments Francis didn't have. And it's like, aha, you see, Protestants about to bend the knee because Pope Leo's bringing in the trad wave. And then Pope Leo's not bringing in the trad wave. And it's like, what's going on here? And it's like, well, don't worry. You know, stop thinking. Just come to Rome. Just come home. But you have to like now learn all of this like insane, crazy doctrine at the same time, and so you just get these two narratives coming at you at once. Where it's like, oh, everything's nice, everything's easy. You just have to come in, you know, sing a little Latin, pray, you know, just do your prayers, and everything's good to go. Except when it's coming to learn the deeper doctrine, suddenly, oh, well, actually, now let me expound upon 2,000 years of theology on you. And the group who I was bringing up earlier, who, you know, in reality, if we want to talk about something taking over not just America, but the world, it's Pentecostalism. Like down the line, Pentecostalism is running circles around Lutherans, Anglicans, Presbyterians, Roman Catholics, Orthodox, like it's not even like breaking a sweat. And a lot of the time with these groups, they don't have to worry about all these convoluted things. You know, you can just go down to Brother Bob's Bible Church and ask him, hey, at this Pentecostal church, what do you do? And they say, well, we follow the Bible and we worship the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost in this church. And that's enough for people, especially, you know, like the one clickers, you know, as I described them earlier, where it's like, I don't need to go deep. I just need to listen to this guy. And if you got Brother Bob saying he reads the Bible and preaches about how Jesus died for your sins and, you know, he's coming again, that's enough for people to join. And so just from a perspective as well for everybody, you know, you can't, we can't be shocked when we get these confusions happening. And I said this in my X today or yesterday, where it's like, you know, if you're going to be posting like this, if you're going to say, oh, well, you know, I don't worship Mary like a god, but also here I am burning Bibles. You know, if you remember last year with Bug Hall, here I am burning Bibles for incense for the Mother of the Lord. It's like, to everybody who's not in your little niche circle, that just screams culty. People want the easy stuff. And again, that's why Pentecostal is blowing up there. And so I think that's the biggest struggle right now with Roman Catholic groups. Because as you're saying too, it's like, I hate people leaving the churches. And, you know, I see Rome to be valid in one way or another, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, but we can't, you know, talk like this if you want people to take you seriously as a group. And then, like I said, this is why groups who don't do all these crazy things are just exploding right now. So that's my two piece there.
Oh, sorry, were you going to show that, Hobby, or do you want to say it?
No, yeah, I was gonna say really quickly. I mean, Tom's pointing out, if you already believed in papacy and disregard all historical data and scholarly analysis of those claims, might as well disregard the data about conversion. Continue believing your illusion on conversions. Now, to be fair to our Roman Catholic friends, right, a lot of them would try to cite their own scholars and this sort of thing, but it was a funny comment. I will say, though, I mean, straight up, guys, if you go to the Substack article that I based this presentation on, I had people in the Substack article that were like, I don't care about stats or science. I'm not a nerd. And they're being dead serious. And you're like, dude, I mean, be ignorant, I guess. I don't know. You know, when the epic own is someone telling you how ignorant they are, I mean, what are you even supposed to do with that? You get what I mean? But you straight up see people that will default to that when they're like, no, you know, they're like, I'm not going to believe the data. I'm not going to believe it. I'm not. You go, okay. It is what it is. You know, I'm just going to have to shake the dust off my feet and move on. Like, what else can you do? But go ahead, Jared.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say that, and to be clear, as we have said before, none of this is supposed to be like the ideals. This is not a criticism of the way that necessarily their own theologians teach things should be. But
that's right.
Again, and this is also not a statistical thing of like people saying, like, I don't have data that says why people converted. But of people that I've met, so again, this is just anecdotal. You can take this with a grain of salt. A lot of the things that people have converted over that I have met who have converted has actually been fairly basic stuff that you could just say is like optics. So I know one person, for example, who had contemplated Rome, and the biggest thing that stopped her, honestly, was just like, yeah, I go to their church and none of the congregants know the Bible at all. Like they just say like, yeah, I don't really read that. Or like, and they'll say like, I wish I did, I should do better. But for some people, it's like, yeah, you go to an evangelical church and they're really big on like, you should be reading the Bible every single day. You should study it very intently. Mm-hmm. And I think every Christian should have that general intuition. And to go to a church where a lot of the people are like, yeah, I just don't do that, it turns them off. Should that be the thing that the thing that disqualifies a tradition for consideration in terms of like what your laity are doing? I don't think so. But I just think that I have seen the data for it that would indicate anything against the experience, so to speak. Yes, also I should say Revoir. Yeah, I do question Data himself. Holodeck stuff. There was that one episode where he got control of the Enterprise when everyone else was asleep. That was questionable. Sorry, Star Trek stuff.
I would add, if I may, too, two quick things. I spent this last weekend with a few dear friends of mine, and I love them both, but we think very differently. And something that was said this weekend in passing discussion, I believe the exact words were, "Books are for nerds. Go to the gym." And it was intended to be a joke, and I understand that. If either one of them is watching, they're gonna give me crap for this later. But like, there is a part of this reality that some people are so adverse to just taking in information as a reality rather than just whatever is subjectively friendly to them and their senses. Like, it's clearly dangerous, and a lot of people will do that. And the choice to be ignorant is a choice that you are freely allowed to make. But so often people will just disregard something that is right in front of their face because it doesn't satisfy whatever perhaps their own experience or passions or desires are. I know for a lot of people, they go to one side or the other of this conversation because it satisfies an itch that they have, even when the objective reality just doesn't bear that out for them. And to add to that, and the other point of what I wanted to say was, a good friend of mine, some of you might know him, he has a YouTube channel called Kevin Non-Trad-Cath. I've appeared on his channel a couple times. He's a former Roman Catholic, radical traditionalist, FSSP type, who's now an agnostic. And I've gone on and I've talked about apostolic succession with him, and I've talked about just a general sort of apologetic for non-Romanist Christianity. And the themes that have come up in those conversations was that in his own experience living in the FSSP, that he didn't have much exposure to the words of Scripture. He didn't have much exposure to outside voices. It was this very insulated, very walled off culture that if anyone outside of not even just Rome, outside of the FSSP had some sort of opinion that was contradictory, it was just basically disregarded, was kind of what it sounded like to me, was his whole upbringing. So I can't stress enough, like, the damage done by not being willing to just listen to things that might be kind of scary for you. And this goes for both sides. Like, we need to be better about not just disregarding things because it comes from a pope. We would all do well to open our ears a little bit more to avoid this sort of books are for nerds, go to the gym mentality that I think a lot of us do tend to fall into. I certainly know that I have.
And it's interesting because, again, there is a balance to all these things. Because I could see someone, let's say, watching our video saying, like, oh, hold on a second. So I'm supposed to go touch grass, but I shouldn't just extrapolate from my personal touching grass experience to the rest of the world, but the stats. But then what we're saying here, and it's kind of funny, right? It's almost like Scripture does this all the time when it comes to the book of Proverbs and just general wisdom that we see all throughout the Bible. This is a matter of prudence and a matter of being wise and knowing how to apply things, right? So, for example, if I'm getting really in my head and I don't know if the people I'm arguing with on social media are bots, or the people that I'm seeing argue with others are bots, or what exactly is going on, I might just close my laptop, turn off my phone, and go hang out with my wife, or go talk to my pastor, or go hang out at my church, or whatever. Go have talks with real people in the real world. At the same time, if let's say that, I don't know, people that I'm talking to in the real world that have these questions, maybe they don't have all the best answers. Well, are there other real people that I can connect with, maybe via the internet, right? That I can actually have some meaningful discussion with. And again, I would encourage you guys that if you do that, have it be extended discussion. Get to know somebody when you're talking with them. Avoid shallow sort of sloganeering across from one side to the other. Avoid these sort of shallow discussions. It's just a matter of applying wisdom, right? And knowing when to go touch grass, and when not to simply extrapolate from your touching grass to the rest of the universe, right? And doing so with tact. So All right, another question for you guys here. What do you think? So we kind of answer this question of like, why are these sort of conversion patterns that what they are that we're seeing? But let's go from there to, again, this niche part of the internet that we're a part of, where people, again, and I want to be clear here, we're not saying that everyone who says they're converting in your timeline are bots. And I probably the majority of them are probably not bots. I can't know though, right? That's the whole point of this discussion that we're having here. That being said, even if every single person showing up in your timeline was a real Roman Catholic convert, okay, and they became Roman Catholic, and they've read all the church fathers, right, as all these accounts claim to have done. Amazing. They've all read the entirety of the Shaft set. That's wow, right? But even if that were true, because I've seen people after I posted this, but how does this explain my timeline? Let's steal men. Let's say that not a single person on your timeline are bots, as unlikely as that actually is. Let's say that they're all real people. If I were to personally take you, the viewer, and introduce you personally to 5,000 people. If I brought you to a place there are 5,000 people and they're in a line ready to shake your hand, ask a few questions, get to know you, by the end of hanging out with me, you might say, oh my goodness, I met an insane amount of people today. I met 5,000. I shook hands with 5,000 individuals. You would say, I met a lot of people. And you'd be right. You did meet a lot of people. But relative to what? You met a lot of people relative to the number of people you were used to meeting in a given day, right? You met a lot, you shook hands with a lot of people relative to the amount of people that you personally run into. Now let's go ahead and narrow down to a topic. I introduce you to 5,000 people and they're all theologians. Oh my goodness, you've met a lot of theologians. Relative to the amount of theologians that you run into in a given day. But again, we can't extrapolate from that and then say, oh my goodness, I met 5,000 theologians. There must be this new wave of theologians. Everyone's a theologian now. We can't do that, right? Or in a similar way, okay, why am I saying this? Because the algorithm, okay, is working as this pipeline, funneling all these people. So even if we steal man, we say every single person on your timeline is a real person. That doesn't mean that there's a lot of these people relative to the United States, relative to this conglomeration of millions and millions and millions of people over this really large landmass. And people don't seem to get that. So for them, it's like, well, if my feed shows me these people and I just assume that they're all real, and let's say even for the steel man that they are all real, therefore there must be this broader trend. But that's just not how numbers work. There are times where you might be onto a broader trend. I mean, you might be, but not all the time. And it just heavily depends. So I don't know if you guys want to add anything to that.
The only thing I was going to add is something that Zach mentioned earlier, which has to do with the fact that we have really like Pentecostals, the ones that are growing a lot, evangelicals are growing a lot. I was just curious during this whole thing. I mean, this is not an exhaustive look by any means, but people might say something like, look how many subscribers Bishop Barron has on YouTube. He has 2.6 million or something like that. Dude's like one of the weirdest charismatic, like the channel that just has the craziest stuff out there. Sid Roth, he has 2.16 million. And he has like a TV show, look at the Trinity Broadcasting Network. I thought I saw that Trent Horn has like, I can't remember. It was in the hundreds of thousands. I saw Kenneth Copeland has like, or Bill Johnson has like 286,000 or something like that. I mean, it's just that we're not in those circles. Having been in evangelical circles, what I have found is that a lot of them are pretty quiet on this stuff because they're just different attitudes towards the interdenominational debates. One example I have is I just remember being in college and talking about these things with Seth, one of the other creators at Scholastic Lutherans, and there was an evangelical girl who's like, I don't care about this stuff at all. I'm non-denominational. Again, I can't map that onto everything, but I'm just saying there's that kind of person out there who just like does not care about this stuff, and so their voice isn't going to show up in the online sphere because they're not here to debate that. The average person probably isn't doing that in the first place. So a lot of people, we are taking people that are really interested in this specific issue, which is biased towards certain groups having that interest. Some groups don't care as much. And so, yeah, the algorithm really feeds us in a specific way, and we have to be cognizant of it. All of us are guilty of the echo chamber at some point.
Yeah, and to add on to that, as somebody who has gone to a Church of Christ college and you know, we hung out with a lot of non-denoms and whatnot. It's just like, yeah, the whole, like, Rome is rarely talked about. And, you know, like, in a lot of cases, it's like, it took me going out of Bible college to get deeper into things like the church fathers and whatnot, because it's just, like, as you're saying, Jared, it's not a priority. Nobody cares. Again, that's why I brought up that point where it's like, when you walk into Brother Bob's Bible church, he says, I preach the Bible and I preach Jesus. Now, I know churches who will almost verbatim use that phrase, I preach the Bible, I preach Jesus. And for, I'm throwing a stat out here that is nonsensical, but it's just to prove where I'm coming from. It's like 95% of the time, that's what people want. And that's, again, where their brain stops. It's like, okay, they preach Bible, they're conservative enough where they're not like having rainbow flags outside their door, and they talk about Jesus every Sunday. That's all I care about. And they just leave it at that. Yeah, it's not until you get into the niche here on YouTube, you know, where you see, as you were saying, 100,000 sub channel, 50,000 sub channel, 600 and, you know, 73,000 channel, mine, and all going to blows over something that your Baptist grandma either probably doesn't understand and or care about, because she just wants Jesus and the Bible, and that's it.
One final thing I want to say before I got to head out, because, you know, just got to get some stuff done out here. Thanks again for having me on, Javier.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is, you know, adding on to everything that we've just said, something I've noticed as a former evangelical that has a ton of evangelical friends. Again, as I've said throughout this video, you know, I can't map this out to everybody, but this is what I've experienced, you know, kind of in a random sample, having been in San Diego, California, having been in Ann Arbor, Michigan, having been in Minneapolis, and having friends all over. What I have found with a lot of evangelicals is even those who are interested in theological debates, a lot of those debates are in-house ones. So, like, when they talk about the debate, you know, for them, it's just going to be Calvinism, Arminianism. I'm not seeing them getting online and debating like Anglicans over like a Methodist leaning, or not, I should say Methodist, because I don't want to offend but like, you know, a Wesleyan kind of Anglican, or a you know, versus like somebody that's more like an infralapsarian Calvinist who's a Presbyterian. I'm typically seeing it's like two evangelicals, one of whom affirms tulip and one of whom just affirms like Wesleyanism effectively on like just predestination, and they're debating. When you get into questions of like actual Reformation direct issues of like what's the formal cause of faith and justification, is faith formed by love, a lot of them are like, I don't even know what this is. And that's not to insult them, it's just like completely different realm. And so if you think, yeah, evangelicals don't care about theology, those who do, a lot of the time it's not debating people like us. A lot of the time it's just in-house, and that's okay. It's just you're not going to see that much. So
well, and I gotta hand it to them. Whereas a lot of the time, say for people like, for example, Trent Horn, who debates atheists and does a great job debating atheists, but a lot of the stuff I see on social media is Roman Catholics trying to poach Protestants, and it's not even working. Right? And so it's like, man, this is so bad. You compare that though to evangelicals, and I remember one time I saw one of these sort of triumphalist posts. I wanted to track it down one of these days, where it was trying to say like making some meme like, oh, evangelicals have no answers to atheism, but we have the Dr. Thomas Aquinas. And I'm like, dude, stop lying to yourself. Okay. Evangelicals have been almost single-handedly holding down the fort of apologetics in America. And that includes even people that unfortunately have really bad theology on other topics, like straight up even heretical theology on other topics. Unfortunately, even like William Lane Craig on Christology and this sort of thing, right? And yet they put all of their effort in being outward facing and trying to get people to believe in the resurrection, trying to get people to Christianity, period. And I think that's also part of the reason when we see those stats, that difference that we saw, right? If memory serves me right, earlier in the stream, I think it was 2% of people who were raised non-religious become Roman Catholic versus 22% becoming Protestant, right? And I think part of that is from the evangelicals kind of holding down the fort for people here. And I think this should be a rallying call, I think, for everybody, not just Roman Catholics, but also, to be honest, Lutherans. I'm sorry, the average evangelical has no clue who we are. Yeah, they just do not. If they've heard of a Lutheran, they think of the ELCA, and that's it. They think of nothing else. I know that was my case growing up. I remember even after I had already become a pastor at a Baptist church, and I remember talking to one of my buddies who was like on one of these Christian sort of dating apps and trying to meet people. And he was like filtering for denominations, I think, or he was like just flipping through. And when he was like, "Oh, what are Lutherans?" and I didn't know anything at the time, so I was like, "No, dude, I think they affirm like LGBT stuff or something." Like, no, definitely say no to all of those. This is just the idea that people have, and so not only is a lot of Roman Catholic, like real Roman Catholic theology, just completely like unknown by these people. That's also the case for confessional Lutheranism most of the time. It's also the case for Anglicanism. It's the case for most of these things. And so there's a lot of work that I think all of us have to do. So this isn't even just haha, Roman Catholics. No. We all have work to do. And it's not going to be helpful for any of us to simply sit around and lie to ourselves and be like, everything is totally awesome. And there's nothing that needs to change.
What is the point of mocking the man on the sinking ship when the water is up to your chin?
So that was all for me. Sorry, guy, that I got to head out. Just got to get some
all
stuff
good
done. So
good
thanks again
Jared.
for having me on. I think this is one of the first times I've been on here. I think maybe a stream of yours before for like a celebration, but I'm really glad that I could have made it.
You're back.
Yeah, hope to see you all.
And because you're in Minnesota, we're gonna have to get some coffee.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'll see you guys.
See ya.
Bye.
So, guys, the final thing then that I'll say to you guys here, and then we can also go ahead and start wrapping things up, is, well, this final question. Now that because we spent a lot of the time on the sort of conversion rates for mainly centering on cradle Catholics is what quite a bit of our data, not all of our data, but quite a bit of our data centering on cradle Catholics, those that are actually raised Roman Catholic, because at the end of the day, and again, people might say, "Aha, but cradle Catholics." Dude, no, presumably, if you want people to convert to your church, you want their kids to remain Roman Catholic too, right? So cradle Catholics are actually super important. That being said, we also covered a lot of data on, unfortunately, Roman Catholic stances on a lot of these important issues, and even on some doctrinal stuff. There's more stuff that I could have pulled up. I just didn't have the time to for this, where things look not very good, okay? Why do you think it is that Rome has such a hard time getting its people to fall in line with their teaching on various issues? Because, again, they use this as a cudgel against us. Oh, the unity that's afforded to us by the Roman magisterium. Ooh, we don't have the chaos of sola scriptura. Ooh, but then even their cope talking points here completely fall flat on their face. Because it's like the people that remain, that still call themselves Roman Catholic, don't show up to church, really. Most of them don't really read the Bible. Most of them don't pray. And most of them think that things like abortion and LGBT stuff is okay. So why do you think it is that Rome has such a hard time inculcating this into their people?
I mean, I know I kind of said it earlier a little bit, where it's just like, because it's such a large institution, you're just getting multiple narratives from a variety of qualified and like even unqualified people, especially on X, where, again, you see, oh, we're the traditionalists. But just ignore the LGBT thing that the Vatican just did a couple months ago, or like, we're conservative. See our Latin Mass, but in the same week, the Latin Mass is getting shut down by these quote unquote conservative church. Or we're all united. And as you're saying, we don't have to have all these disagreements. We listen to the Pope. Well, until the Pope says something I don't agree with, and suddenly, he didn't say Simon Says on the magic chair, it's fine. Like, I don't have to listen to him right now, but you Protestants better listen to Pope Leo. It's like, you just get these like back and forth, like, we say this, it's like double speak almost, we say this, but this actual thing happens, but again, we say this, but don't think almost in that way. And again, I think it's just because it's such a massive organism in itself. It's kind of like its own little planet in a way, where you're going to have all these variety talking points. And like I said earlier with the Cult of Mary picture that we had popped up, it's like it's really hard to fall in line with this, because even though you have a pope, even though you have all these teachings and papal bulls and ex cathedrals and all these things, it's like, because it's so big. And there truly isn't this, what's the word I want to use? It's like a scent to listen to our guy, because even he's kind of wishy-washy on some things. It's, well, I have to make, it's kind of like, I have to make my, my Roman Catholic world be what I want it to be, so it just makes sense for me. And then, that's where we get guys starting YouTube channels and just allowing themselves to say, you guys are the base you guys we're the base Catholics. You come to Rome. But man, look at what the Vatican did. That was so bad. Here's my 9-series 3-hour video documentary about how this really bad thing isn't actually that bad, and you're crazy, and just convert and stop thinking.
Well, and by the way, let me give another example right now. Regardless of what people might think of the statement or not, I actually, maybe a little controversial for people, I actually for the most part liked their statement, but the American bishops almost unanimously, just released a statement on immigration. Let me go ahead and put this on the screen. We're not going to go through the whole thing, but just so people can see what it is and where they can go find it. They issued a special message on immigration from their plenary assembly in Baltimore with 216 votes in favor, 5 votes against, and 3 abstentions. Almost entirely unanimous, in favor of this message. Talking about immigration and talking about the how sad they are, the state of the contemporary debate, the vilification of immigrants, and so on and so forth. And what have we seen on social media as a result of this? And again, to be consistent with our previous warnings, I'm not even just talking about comment sections here. There's entire articles that have been written from Roman Catholic outlets critiquing this message and saying that the bishops are tone deaf. They don't know what's going on. You have scholars and priests and others online saying that the bishops are they don't have their finger on the pulse or whatever, right? Especially, I'm sure, a lot of Groypers and such and so on and other people.
So on and so forth.
Yeah, almost it was crazy there. But anyway, you have Groypers and those other people that disagree with the bishops. And here, for example, on Twitter, again, who knows how many of these are bots or what have you, but immediately you start going through the comment section and it's almost nothing but criticisms. And it's almost nothing but people going after their bishops. And so on and so forth. And so, well, I'm left wondering, right? Because to your point here, Zach, we have a lot of mixed messaging. We're told, well, you need the magisterium. Well, you need a clear voice, people that speak with authority. You need. But then when their bishops almost unanimously go and put out statements, what happens? Ratrad-based Groyper Crusader 420 on Twitter disagrees. Random layperson. And they're like, oh, I'm here. I am going to take my stand against the bishops. So which is it? Right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of this mixed messaging here. And again, obviously, we're not saying as though the bishops were speaking ex cathedra. That we know they're not infallible, but still, right. I mean, this is a part surely of the ordinary magisterium. I mean, like all the bishops of America putting out a message together on this. I mean, for people to just ignore this, like again, I know that even within their system, they could say, yeah, this is wrong, whatever. But guys, I mean, like honestly, even within our own systems, if basically every single pastor in the LCMS came out and made a statement on something, and I found myself disagreeing with it, number one, I wouldn't immediately jump on X and lambast our shepherds, number one. But number two, I would sit down and say, hey, hold on a second. Am I missing something? Like, why am I not seeing something here? And this isn't just this one specific issue, by the way, that like, as though I'm saying like, anything about this particular topic. I'm just using this as a case study, as an example, where people in this camp will preach to the Protestants, well, you need the magisterium, you need all these things. But then you have that mixed messaging in practice, where everyone can just ignore the bishops if they want to ignore them, as long as they disagree with them on their pet issue. And so it's really weird mixed messaging. So
yeah, I would point out a couple things. One, just obviously echo what you're saying, but I think the problem that we get into is when we see this sort of, again, from this very vocal minority, because based on the statistics, it actually sounds like most Romanists in the example you gave would probably be on the left-leaning side of the issue. But this voice we see online it seems very hypocritical to me to say that this church is absolutely and entirely trustworthy in the event that what happens is infallible. Say the Pope makes an ex cathedra statement, say there's an ecumenical council, whatever it looks like. But it's supposedly it is obvious to just submit to that church's judgment in those contexts. Yet the moment that you're not shackled with that infallible nameplate, it's as if it's just able to be disregarded. It's not even adiaphora. It's just totally able to be thrown away. That it ultimately demonstrates that these people, these loud voices, are grasping for a church that they want to exist, but it doesn't. They want in their mind, they've invented this church that is trustworthy. They've invented this church that is worthy of submission of intellect and will to, and yet in every circumstance other than what is absolutely necessary to submit to, they dissent. It just shows that I think people are in love with this idea of a Roman church that simply doesn't exist. Perhaps back pre-Vatican II, Vatican I-ish era, these people might have been more happy, but it's just not the reality. And I wanted then also to point out something that Zach said that I think is just true, that the fact that Rome is as gigantic as it is, it gets harder and harder to hide the fact that this unity just doesn't exist. It's a farce. And I don't want to be overly harsh in my language, but it simply isn't true. The claim isn't true. It doesn't exist. It's simply the fact that this church is too big to be perfectly unified in every little thing that they have made infallible. You could go back to the 15th century. This is a citation from Wessel Gansford, who at his time was a well-respected Catholic theologian pre-Reformation. He even said that, I'll quote him directly so no one trips me up. For how shall he judge those whom he cannot know? For how shall he judge the faith of a man whose language he is not acquainted with? Hence we reach the conclusion that the Holy Spirit has kept for himself the task of encouraging, quickening, persevering, and increasing the unity of the church. He has not left it to a Roman pontiff who often pays no attention to it. Again, this is a pre-Reformation figure just recognizing what is objectively, I think, obvious and clear, that the unity does not flow forth from the throne of a single guy because he's not capable of maintaining it no matter how many delegates that he has. So I think Rome just, when you push it to the end of the rope, has to admit that this unity that they are using as their chief selling point just doesn't exist.
And again, it's a sort of thing where if they're dealing with us, oh, we're all united and we're this solid block. But then when they're faced with the reality of having to deal with their internal politics, they're very keenly aware of the variety and the differences of opinion and the way that they're going to have to coalition build in order to stop other coalitions that they disagree with within their own party within their own tradition from advancing. And it's again a similar sort of maneuver that they do with us. Oh, the scriptures are unclear. Who even knows? But then if they're debating with someone who's a Unitarian, or they're debating with a Muslim, or they're debating with, wow, so interesting how magically the scriptures all clear themselves up, right? And so it's just dependent on who they're having a dialogue with at any given moment in time.
Yeah. Well, even just look at how we view we're probably gonna get comments from angry Roman Catholics about this, but it's just look at us. As somebody put in the comments earlier, we're somehow separated brothers, but also, free falling Tom Petty style into hell. And it's if in order for you to be saved, you have to join the one true church. Well, I mean, unless you're like a Muslim or an Eastern Orthodox, then you kind of get the bro pass, kind of, sort of. But don't, again, it's as you're saying, whoever is the person we're speaking to, either you get the pass, or actually no, you're a Protestant for some reason, no passes for you, scripture unclear, all of your Protestant apologists got debunked by Christian Wagner, easy peasy lemon squeezy.
So with that, guys, I want to go ahead here. Is there anything else you guys want to bring up before we go ahead and close out that you would like to say before we head out?
I would just reiterate, all we're trying to do is point out that there's a false narrative going on. I in no way celebrate the issues in Rome or the issues in Eastern Orthodoxy, which are every bit as bad, maybe worse. That the thing that I want to make as clear as possible is that the church hurts right now, and I'm referring to every single person who is in friendship with Christ, the royal priesthood of the baptized, that I take no joy in seeing Rome suffer. Of course, I would love to see everyone stop being Roman Catholic and come into fellowship with the Lutheran Church. But my point is to say that apostasy in Rome is not a victory for the Protestants. I mean, it's painful and it hurts, and I want to see all fellowships that claim the name of Christ succeed and gain members and do well while also maintaining real, true Orthodox Christianity. So I just hope nobody hears this as if it's just, for Protestants just poking holes and taking shots at, a hemorrhaging wound. It's just that this narrative hurts both of us.
To your point, even for those of us who are involved in these sort of dialogues and the polemic scene and this sort of thing, I guess let the record show, I would much rather someone be a Roman Catholic than an atheist.
Absolutely.
Like what? You get what I mean?
Absolutely.
Or I don't know, a Roman Catholic than a Buddhist or a vaguely religious place with Ouija boards or whatever on Halloween sort of person, right? Out here doing astrology or whatever on Instagram. No, right? And so to see them bleed people, not just to us, but to your point, Adam, just seeing them bleed people, especially to entirely just non-Christian stuff. That's always bad, and it's always sad to see, right? And so again, and I want to say one more thing as well. I said it before, I'll say one more time here at the end. If new data comes out, guys, I'm willing to revise my opinion. I think hopefully those from the other side that have dealt with me on things, whether it's a correction to one of my articles, whether it's they take issue with something I've said or whatever, I like to think that I'm fairly receptive, okay? And if new data comes out, then hey, we can go ahead and deal with that and talk about it and talk from there moving forward. But people need to actually produce evidence. The problem here is there's a bunch of baseless claims being made where all the evidence seems to imply otherwise. And so if they come up with some evidence, if the comeback is finally real, then hey, we'll gladly talk about that, chat about it, talk about what we could do. But until then, it doesn't seem as though things are looking good on that side. Zach, anything else you want to say before we close out?
Yeah, just at the same time to what Adam was saying, like what I was saying earlier, it's like what is the point of me hopping on a live stream and mocking the guy on the sinking ship when my ship's sinking and I'm chin deep in water. Now, to be optimistic about it, I do see the plateau of Christianity, shrinking to be a great thing. And, I see a lot of young people, going into all of these churches. And to me, that gets me excited because it's like, I don't fear about the future because I know what all these young people are wanting. They're wanting to go back to church. And so it's like, again, to your point, it's like, if somebody finds Christ in the Roman Catholic Church, awesome. Same way with the Lutheran Church. Like, I don't have any issues with the Lutheran Church. And so it's like, if somebody finds Christ in the Lutheran Church, great. Fantastic. That's somebody else hearing about God in one way or another. So, yeah, for me, it's like, I just want the truth. And, I want people to hear the truth. And if there is this lie, especially about this explosion of, Roman Catholicism, when somebody figures out that that's a lie, it will trigger an effect of, well, what else did you lie about? Is Jesus? Did Jesus even rise from the dead? Is the papacy the one true church? Is he the guy running the show? And then it just goes into a spiral mode. And suddenly, as we're seeing with these statistics, that's just going to make the statistic of people leaving increase because their entire entering into the church was based on a lie.
What you win them with is what you keep them with.
Exactly.
And if you win them with a bunch of fake triumphalism, when eventually reality will eventually come around the corner and bonk people on the head, whether they want it to or not. Yeah. And when that inevitably happens, to your point, if someone's been sold on just triumphalism, we're this bulwark that never has any issues, when they're inevitably met with reality, that's not a pretty picture, okay, that's been painted for them.
Yeah.
And it will not withstand scrutiny. And so we need to be careful. And that goes even for us as well, right? I mean, that was one of the things that sent me spiraling as a Baptist when I was like, oh, we're going to disprove Rome. And please, 2 Bible verses we can go ahead and disprove Rome with. And it'll take 5 minutes. And that wasn't the case, right? And I just had a bunch of bad, chick track, understanding of Roman Catholicism. And that sent me into a spiral. Now imagine someone that ends up coming to Christ or ends up becoming Roman Catholic, and they've been persuaded by all these arguments that are skepticism sort of arguments, right? And they're sort of pushing Pyrrhonian skeptic talking points and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
What happens when reality hits those people? And this is what they were won with. It doesn't lead in a good direction.
Yeah, and just to end my point, and this is for us, this is for the Roman Catholic guys, this is for the Eastern Orthodox guys, is we got to remember, I'm using a paraphrase here of 1 Corinthians 13:6, where it's like, love doesn't rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. And if we're going to show people the love of Christ, it has to be done in the truth. And that's the only way we're going to succeed, especially as guys online, or, you know, guys who are going to go into the clericals, is I love Christ so much that I am doing nothing but telling people the truth, whether it's nice or not. And that's, you know, something I wanted to leave us all here with as well.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say is TLDR of this stream, as has been commented, get offline, touch grass, go pray, people, go read your Bible, go to church. Yeah, go touch grass. And with that, we are out.